We're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd of September. Today, could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? That's what Keir Starmer appears to want, should he become Prime Minister. Catherine Forster is following the story.
Yes, Keir Starmer has been caught on camera saying he does not want to diverge from EU rules and regulations, leading many people to think that Brexit might not be safe under a Labour government. I'll bring you more shortly.
Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down as the chairman of Fox and News Corp after 7 decades. We look back at his journey as one of the most influential media moguls.
The toast of France. The King and Queen begin the last day of their royal visit.
And Aidan's got your weather.
It's another day of dodging downpours, but it won't be an entirely wet weekend. I'll have all the details in the forecast coming up.
And Paul's got your sport.
I do. Good morning. Liverpool, Rangers and West Ham all win in Europe yesterday. Not so good for Brighton and Aston Villa. Also, it's World Cup rugby weekend. All the home nations are playing and the Solheim Cup starts today.
Lovely stuff, Paul. Thank you. Very excited about that.
Very much.
I'm Stephen Dixon. Good morning.
And I'm Anne Diamond. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
Should we talk about food?
Spam.
Spam, spam, spam,
The
spam,
front
spam.
page of the Daily Star says Save Our Spam. And they're launching a campaign to get us to go out and buy spam.
Buy spam.
Because apparently we're not. And the thought is that if we don't buy spam a bit more, it might actually disappear from our supermarket shelves.
Yes, but here they've listed the top 10 items which were no longer found in cupboards, and I have to say,
I don't think spam was ever in my cupboard.
well, there's spam bovril, corned beef, rice pudding, semolina, tinned peaches. Then number 7 is smash, which I have got in my cupboard.
Oh.
Angel delight, which I've got in my cupboard.
Really?
Tinned sardines, which I haven't, and number 10 is pot noodle, which I have a lot in the cupboard.
Really?
Oh,
That's
yes.
very naughty.
Oh, it's
actually, because there's
lovely.
nothing nutritious in it.
Nothing bad in it. It's just stuff.
If I read out the ingredients, I don't know whether that's true.
But what you should have in your cupboard, apparently,
It's spam.
couscous or couscous.
No, you see, I have got that
Was
in
it
my
couscous?
No, couscous.
Couscous.
Yeah.
Harissa paste, coconut milk, pesto, which I've got.
milk.
Oh, I've got pesto.
Yeah, pesto.
Quinoa or quinoa to us northerners.
You have to say quinoa.
Teriyaki sauce,
Yeah.
miso paste,
Yeah, I've got that. I don't eat that, but my sons do.
bulgur wheat,
Yeah.
soy sauce. I've
Oh,
got
lots
that,
of soy
obviously.
sauce.
And chickpeas.
Yeah.
No.
See, the nation's tastes are changing.
I'm
That's the point.
So I'm very old-fashioned then, according to that.
Do you drink Bovril?
No, it's meat, isn't it?
Well, that's it. It's the smell. I've never tasted Bovril, but the smell is hideous. Marmite's not on that list, actually, so Marmite's still very popular, I think.
Quite right.
Yeah. But, I mean, the nation's tastes are changing, aren't they? Have you got quinoa in your cupboard? I'd love to know. I do like quinoa. I mean, I know it sounds stupidly posh, and there ought to be a plainer name for it.
Yes.
But, yeah, things are a-changing.
Well, let us know what's in your cupboard if you're old-fashioned like me or a bit more modern like Anne. gbnews@gbnews.com.
I'm so sophisticated.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, tell you what we'll talk about right now is this video clip that a lot of people are talking about. It's the Labour leader Keir Starmer. It was filmed last weekend, posted on social media and seen by some as confirmation that Labour wants closer ties with the EU.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Speaking at a conference in Montreal, Keir Starmer appeared convinced that he was wanted a stronger Britain, and he said both the EU and the UK would need to work on common goals such as climate change and immigration. This is what he had to say.
Most of the conflict with the UK being outside of the UK arises insofar as the UK wants to diverge and do different things to the rest of our EU partners. Obviously, the more we share values, the more we share a future together, the less the conflict. And actually, different ways of solving problems become available.
Let's head to our Westminster studio and our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Morning, Catherine. I mean, to be fair, he does sound like someone who is making an argument for joining the EU rather than how we do better out of it.
Well, that's what many people are saying. The Conservatives, of course, have jumped on this and said, aha, this is proof that Labour, a Labour government would reverse Brexit. And it certainly has caused a lot of debate because Keir Starmer has been very, very careful in what he said about Brexit in the UK. But in this rather unguarded moment, on Saturday in Montreal with this meeting of progressive centre-left leaders, he's gone rather farther than he ever has before in saying that he doesn't want to diverge from EU regulations. He talks about in environmental standards in terms of workers' rights, which sort of begs the question then, well, what is the point of Brexit? Now, the Conservatives, as I've said, have leapt upon this. The EU, the deal that we've currently done, and bear in mind that everybody's come along and said, we'd get a better deal. Theresa May said she'd get a good deal. Boris Johnson said get a better deal. Rishi Sunak claimed to get a better deal with the Windsor framework. Keir Starmer seems to think that they can get a better deal too, but it certainly does sound like closer alignment. And the thing is, there's an election looming, as we're all very, very well aware. Now, there were huge numbers of Labour voters in the last election, particularly in what we now call the Red Wall, that voted Conservative for the first time, partly because they didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, largely because they wanted to, quote, get Brexit done as Boris Johnson promised. Now, this sort of message from Keir Starmer, I suspect, may set some alarm bells ringing, though Labour are now saying, no, absolutely not. We've ruled out rejoining. We're not going back in the single market. We're not going back in the customs union. The EU are not going to make the rules. But certainly it does sound like Sir Keir Starmer does want a very close relationship with the EU.
OK, Catherine, we'll be back with you a bit later on as well, because we've got a lot to discuss on that one. And I'm sure everybody at home has got a view. What does that tell you about Keir Starmer and the way the general election might be fought? Meanwhile, to somebody who always claims that he got the Prime Minister in,
whoever wins,
President in, whoever wins, media mogul Rupert Murdoch has always said it was him what done it. However, he is now stepping down as chairman of Fox and News Corp. His eldest son, Lachlan, will lead both companies.
In a memo sent to employees, Mr Murdoch said the time is right for him to take on different roles at 92, and he's set to transition to the role of chairman emeritus. But well, it basically just means retired, doesn't it?
No, I think he's going to keep keep his hand in.
Is it? But that's what emeritus sort of means.
It means you get involved when you want to.
So he's not quite letting go of the reins. Anyway, so he's going to be chairman emeritus of both firms from mid-November.
Well, Breakfast's Dean Spencer takes a look back at his 7-decade run as one of the most influential global men in the media industry.
Born in Melbourne in 1931, Murdoch developed an interest in the media at a young age. While at Oxford University, he tried to buy the student newspaper. His father, Sir Keith Murdoch, one of Australia's most distinguished newspapermen, died in 1953 and left the family a controlling share of a single The Adelaide News. Rupert returned from Britain to run it aged 22. He quickly expanded the business, buying a string of other titles, but Murdoch's ambitions were global. In 1968, he bought the UK's News of the World, The Sun, and by 1986, The Times and The Sunday Times. His papers were accused of political manipulation. A television revolution followed, as Murdoch went on to launch the satellite TV service Sky. But Murdoch had his eye on a bigger prize and began to focus on the US, where he gained a foothold in 1976 with the tabloids The New York Post. In 1985, News Corp bought 20th Century Fox. By the late 1980s, Murdoch's empire had racked up near crippling debts, but it survived. Murdoch faced further criticism in 2011 when journalists at his UK newspaper, The News of the World, were found to have hacked the phones of countless celebrities and of the murdered teenager Millie Dowler. Members of the House of Commons Culture Committee described him as not a fit person to exercise the stewardship of the major international company. The News of the World was no longer, and he sold his shares in Fox and Sky. But even with the dwindling empire, the Murdoch's family net worth is currently estimated to be $14.1 billion by Forbes magazine.
Well, let's talk to our senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, who joins us now. Morning to you, Nigel. What are we to make of this? And I suppose what the future holds for the Murdoch empire with Lachlan in charge?
Yeah, I think that the great difference is going to be that Lachlan won't meddle in politics quite the same way as his father did. I mean, Rupert Murdoch has spent his life shaping politics and influencing it on 3 continents. I don't think his son will be quite the same. However, I also think Anne's probably right that Rupert Murdoch hasn't actually quite given up the reins of power, that he will be there in the background, and I still think he might try and do a bit of meddling anyway, even at 92.
It is said by all the commentators in today's press that Lachlan isn't very interested at all in Britain or the British end of the empire, and that maybe at some point he will actually sell off the British interests, particularly starting with The Sun. What do you think?
Well, he might. It'll be a business decision, I think, rather than anything else. I mean, it's perfectly true. Lachlan has had much more interest in American media than he has over here. But the Sun is still a successful newspaper. I can't see any reason why in the immediate future the empire would want to shed it.
Do you think we'll ever see anyone like Rupert Murdoch again with this much power? Because it does raise a lot of questions, doesn't it, as to whether someone who is a media mogul that has business interests should be wielding as much political power as he does.
No, absolutely right. I knew Rupert Murdoch personally in the 1980s when I was living in New York through family connections. And his meddling in politics was going on then. We used to argue about his campaign to stop Teddy Kennedy becoming US president, his support for Margaret Thatcher. She was very grateful for that. And I think you're right. We won't see his like again. That Rupert Murdoch is not just one of the biggest media tycoons. He is the biggest in media history. Even more so than William Randolph Hearst.
OK, Nigel, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
And let's whiz ahead to other people who are making the news headlines. And it's been a very triumphant visit for the King and Queen in France. They're going to start today with a trip to Bordeaux, where they're expected to meet with communities affected by last year's wildfires.
Yeah, they're also going to enjoy some wine tasting at a sustainable vineyard. And Bordeaux is home to almost 40,000 Britons, apparently, and is for some reason, unknown to God and man, frequently compared to Bristol.
I think it was an early twinning or something like that, the King said yesterday. Anyway, joining us this morning, royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole. Good morning, Michael. It's been a very successful visit, hasn't it?
Good morning, and good morning, Stephen. Or should that be bonjour and vive le roi? You know, long live the king, because the French have taken King Charles and Queen Camilla to their hearts. They guillotined their last king 230 years ago and overthrew their last emperor, Napoleon III, in 1870. But they're still fascinated by monarchy. In fact, there are two claimants to the French throne. I've met one of them, the Comte de Paris. And anybody who looks at French magazines, glossy ones or France Dimanche, will see it's always full of British royal news. So it's been a great success, this visit. Yesterday, in particular, the visit to Saint-Denis, which is the rather poor suburb of northern France, where it happens, French kings are buried in a basilica there. And that went down very well, with the Queen playing table tennis with Brigitte Macron, and the King visiting people and wishing best of luck to people competing in the Rugby World Cup. But now they go down to Aquitaine, to Bordeaux, as you say. Until about 570 years ago, Aquitaine was a British possession with an English king. So the ties are there. It's not just the claret wine. That's right. They're very full. And there's a very big British community there, and they'll be meeting them and visiting an organic vineyard.
Yes, I mean, it helps, doesn't it, that the King is a Francophile. I mean, he spoke French in his speech, which must have been quite impressive. But Camilla has looked like a queen on this visit, hasn't she? She's dressing superbly and she looks the business.
Absolutely. And, of course, she paid a compliment to France by dressing in Dior for the banquet in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. Of course, it's impossible to compete with the chic of Brigitte Macron. I mean, she's absolutely superb. One lady is 70, that's Brigitte, and the Queen is 76. But they're a good pair, and they looked as if they were getting on well. And do you know what I've noticed? The King looks so happy. He's so different from the Queen. The late Queen, I mean, his mother. He loves chatting to people. He's quite tactile. All the time, he's talking to people and relating to them, and that's going down terribly well. He looks very relaxed into the role, a year into it. And this visit, I mean, all state visits are important, but this is an extremely important state visit, and he's spoken of the Golden Bond, which ties us to our good friends and our good allies. Of course, we've had bumpy moments with the French. We always will have. But they are our nearest neighbours, and we all love to go there, don't we?
We certainly do.
We do.
Michael, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Now it is 16 minutes past 6. Let's just remind you of the top stories this morning. And could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer appears to want if he becomes Prime Minister.
Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down as chairman of Fox and News Corp after 7 decades. We'll be looking back at his journey as one of the most influential global media moguls.
And coming up, the landlord who's owned a pub for nearly 40 years and says it's still cash only for a pint. We'll find out why later on.
And at 6:17, Aidan McGivern has your Friday weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day. The showers will transfer east so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east. Odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. and it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland. Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend. Plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day's experience.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
All the sport in just a moment with Paul. We'll be going through last night's Europa League action. This is Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning to you. It is 6:21. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio and online.
Shall we have a look at a lot of the stories that are coming into the newsroom at the moment? And a woman has accused Russell Brand of exposing himself to her and then laughing about it later on air on his BBC Radio 2 show. The woman claims it happened in 2008 when she was working in the same building as the broadcaster in Los Angeles. The actor and comedian has not yet commented on the latest allegation, but denies all other allegations against him.
NatWest has confirmed issues with its cash deposit machines after customers reported money was missing from their accounts. Several people on X said that recently deposited cash wasn't showing up in their balance. Others said they'd gone overdrawn as a result and expressed concern that they would be charged.
And Earth is about to receive a special delivery from space. A NASA spacecraft will fly close to Earth, dropping off a cupful of rubble that has been collected from an asteroid. Scientists believe that this handful of dust could actually hold the secret to where we all came from. Which begs the question, why are they dropping it?
Don't know. That's a very good point.
We're going to find out more about that
Maybe
for you.
it's just cheaper.
Or
Just
maybe
drop
they
it.
want to
Someone
drop
will
it
catch it.
to find the effect that it has. Is it? No, I don't understand that at all. We'll look into that.
No, don't know. We'll find out. Anyway, Paul's got the sport for us this morning. Good morning, good
I
morning.
have a cup full of rubble for you, a cup full of sporting rubble.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about European football?
I think we've
Anne,
got
I know you've been watching it last night. I
honestly,
know.
that's why I came in today.
And Anne, and how do you feel about the fact that there's going to be more football on TV?
Well, I'm
as
very divided about it.
Are you sure?
Now, what was the result? I didn't know what the results of that were.
They're still talking about that. They have agreed.
So who's talking about what?
Well, this is the Premier League. This is the Premier League.
Oh, they're going to show even
There's
more
more of it.
matches. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be even more on TV.
On what, subscription channels? Or
On everything, yeah. Well, it's all subscription, isn't it? All the
about money.
live games. It's all about the money because they're going to make billions. It's just so many billions that goes abroad in here. But to cut a long story short, they decided what they were against is not only the 3 o'clock Saturday kickoff they won't have, but the Sunday. They were talking even about Sunday evening, which would really ruin things for me and Antiques Roadshow. So there was no chance I could possibly watch football on a Sunday.
You ever heard of a recorder?
Oh, well, was it like that? That's how my dad used to do it. Like that, and then, hold on, there we are, hit those two. Well, anyway, last night in Europe, there was the Europa League and also the Conference League. Liverpool won against Lask of Linz.
Lask of Linz?
Lask of Linz. Well, they're actually called Linzer Athletic Sporting Club, which is L-A-S-K, from Linz. So you don't actually say Lask of Linz because the L stands for Linz anyway.
That's saying the M1 motorway.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly the same thing. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm not as green as I'm cabbage looking, Paul.
You know what? Very good. So anyway...
Who scored the goals?
Well, I know that... Why are you going to ask me that? Because I know Mo Salah came on at the end. He scored one of the goals, but they were 1-0 down. But we had Jurgen Klopp, and it's his 50th win in Europe. And you've actually got who scored the goals. There we are, Darwin Núñez and also Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz as well. I know Mo Salah scored because he started with 11 different players from the Wolves game, as you well know, earlier on in the week. So then they have the insurance policy of being able to bring them on again. Yeah. Should there be any?
So, Paul, how did Brighton get on in their European debut against AEK Athens?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Anne, because I was just going to come to that. What are the chances? AEK Athens managed to beat Brighton. Brighton, first time in Europe, very exciting time. They're there and everybody thinks it's going to be great, but they lost to AEK Athens 3-2, but they've also got Marseille and Ajax in their group, so it's going to be very tricky.
All right, here's a trick question then. For what does AEK stand for? Club, I presume, K.
It's going to be club. There's always...
Athens, European club?
European, Athens, European,
guessing
extra
now.
Special club.
You're guessing.
But that's... Anyway, Rangers beat Real Betis 1-0, and West Ham. Here's another, and I'll be honest with you, with Europe and often Conference League, although this is in the Europa League, you get clubs that I'm not familiar with, and one of those clubs is Baka Topola. I thought he was in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes,
That's as far as I got. But anyway, Baka Topola, south of Serbia, went 1-0 up against West Ham, and then West Ham turned things around against the Topolas.
Topola. They toppled the Topolas.
They did topple the Topolas. Legia Warsaw beat Aston Villa, and so that's it. That's pretty much everything. 4-time Europa League winner.
Solheim Cup?
Oh, yes, the Solheim Cup starts today. Because we've got the Ryder Cup. We talked about the Ryder Cup yesterday. The Ryder Cup starts next weekend, but the Solheim Cup, which is pretty much the same as the Ryder Cup, it's the women's version. Started in 1990. We've won the last 3 against the Americans, so Europe against America, and that begins in Spain today.
Excellent. Have you ever eaten Spam?
Yes, I have.
Do you like it?
Yes. You know what? I did actually used to quite like it, and I've still got a tin of Spam that was like a promotional thing from, Spam-A-Lot, when they did the Monty Python thing, this promotional tin of Spam, which I still have and haven't opened. Does it go off?
No, I wouldn't. No.
I think it lasts about 120 years.
I think it does, and if you turn the key...
it had that special key, didn't it? But apparently, we were saying, because the lead in the Daily Star today is that we're not eating Spam like what we used to, and so it's probably going to disappear from supermarket shelves.
Do you Spam? I bet you're not.
But already, lots of people have been in touch saying you still get Spam fritters in your local fish and chip shop.
Yes.
Adrian says Spam fritters from the Chippy are lovely, especially with baked beans.
And Paul says Spam fritters and chips from the Chippy, best ever, absolutely beautiful. Get from with mushy peas.
I think it depends where you're going to your chippies, because some chippies down south, I don't think you get the spam for
No, maybe.
Further north, sometimes you do.
I wonder if it is a north-south thing. I don't think so, though. Betty in Dorset said, as a child, just after the war, we were given beef tea boiled in hot water if we were poorly.
Yeah.
Apparently Bovril's going out of fashion as well.
It is as well. Just like you, Paul, so you can go. But we will see you a little bit later.
Well, we'll see. Like an old tin of spam, I'll last forever. Thank you.
Right, stick with us. Coming up, how the newspapers are reporting the big stories, including that latest allegation against Russell Brand, plus other stories from elsewhere, because it's headline makers. Next, you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 6:30. Good morning. This is Breakfast on GB News. Our top stories today, and could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? Well, that's what Keir Starmer appears to want, should he become the next Prime Minister.
Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down or stepping back as the chairman of Fox and News Corp after 7 decades. We'll be looking back at his journey as one of the most influential global media moguls.
And the toast of France. The King and Queen begin their last day of their visit en France today, meeting Brits who live in the country, particularly in Bordeaux, actually, where they're heading today, and produce wine.
French toast and Bordeaux.
Yes.
What a mix.
Can't argue with that. Well, time for headline makers this morning. Let's start with the front pages, should we? The Telegraph has Jeremy Hunt saying tax cuts are virtually impossible, and he's warned he faces some difficult decisions.
That's all he ever says.
Don't we all?
Yeah. The Times says Rishi Sunak wants an A-level reform to boost pupils' life skills, and he aims to open divisions with Labour.
In The Sun, the BBC dragged deeper into the Russell Brand scandal after he was accused of exposing himself whilst working and then talking about it on his radio show.
And finally, The Star, save our spam, after it was revealed that shoppers are turning their backs on old-fashioned foods.
Let's talk to former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and writer and columnist Emma Wolfe, who are here for us this morning. Good to see you both. Let's kick off, David, with this, because it is the clip that everyone's talking about this morning. Keir Starmer talking about having sort of fewer what's the word he uses? It's not divisions, but...
Yes, he basically has said he will not disagree with major decisions that the EU has made.
Do you think that's what he's saying, though?
Well, I mean, with Keir, it'd never be quite clear, you know. Keir may be a lawyer, but he was one of those lawyers who obfuscates rather than offers clarity. Look, I think probably the Tories are toast, right? I mean, I wouldn't bet the ranch on the Tories doing well at the next election. But if anyone can pull the Tories' problems and say out of the bouillon, since we're all very French, aren't we, today? I mean, the Tories may be deep in the bouillon, but they can be pulled out by Keir Starmer. And I do not understand what the man is playing at. The idea that going along with European decisions, it's not as though we left some entity. Look, I was in a good position, actually. It's like being a Chelsea fan going to a Manchester United-Manchester City game. I hate both of them. So I hated the EU and I hated most of the people who came out with a pack of lies saying why we should come out of the EU. So I'm in a very good place here. But I tell you something, I don't understand why Keir Starmer thinks there's votes in going along with the EU. Because the EU... people
Well,
don't
there probably are,
it's not the shining city on a hill, you know.
talk to youngsters my son's age, and they would go for that. They would. They'd think, all right, let's move just a little bit closer to the EU. They really would.
Quite frightening. No wonder they want to have the voting age reduced to 9 or something, yeah.
Well, yeah, what do you think?
I just wonder why both parties... I mean, we saw it yesterday with Net Zero and Rishi Sunak kind of U-turning in terms of the pledges that we need to do to get there, but not really U-turning on the ultimate goal. I just think both parties could do themselves a favour by just being clear. We're not idiots. Voters are not idiots. You can't just pretend that you're sort of both. You're sort of going to carry on with Brexit. You're not going to reverse Brexit, but you are going to go in the direction of the EU for voters like your son. I just think, why not be clear with us about where you stand on this? Because Keir Starmer hasn't been clear.
But you're asking politicians to be honest.
Of course, and they want to have it both ways.
But that's true, because don't forget, Keir Starmer, we always need to remember that when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, and somewhere in the far distance you had to put a pair of binoculars on to see where he was on the spectrum, Keir Starmer was his spokesman on Europe. And, you know, there are two sorts of lawyers in politics. I was a lawyer, but I used to tell my mother I was a pianist in a strip club, but I was actually a lawyer, I have to admit.
She preferred you to be a...
Oh, I think she thought it would have been... I'd have had a great career tinkling the ivies in the strip club. She wasn't so sure about everything else. But the point of the matter...
It's the idea of you going to your mother saying, I want to be a politician. Oh, no. All right, I'll be a lawyer.
She did say that. She did say both of those things. But she was a sensible woman, my mum. Anyway, here's the reality that that Keir Starmer... There are lawyers who wanted to go into politics and they became lawyers. Keir Starmer is a lawyer, a signed-up lawyer. Now, the thing about a lawyer is, a proven lawyer, as Peter Cook always used to say, that they don't actually have any deep-seated beliefs. You know, you tell them to argue one thing and you give them a few bob, and then you give them a few more bob, and they argue something completely different. And there is no sense of belief with this man.
But he is playing a dangerous game, is it? Because I think it's right. There is a younger generation who perhaps may buy into this idea of a closer tie with Europe again. They'd buy into that, so it's a vote winner in one sense. But red wall seats...
It's also a huge betrayal of all of those 51% that voted for Brexit.
Yes.
No matter what you think. And also, will people like Anne's son... No, not throwing shade on him.
No, it's all of
Will
us.
they go out and vote?
It's all of them.
Will they go out and vote? Because you have to remember, you want... OK, well...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, traditionally it's going to be the older, the red wall, who will vote against this.
But there's a problem, actually, isn't there, even with the older voters in that sense, because older voters tend to be more right-wing and all the rest of it. But they're split now. Parties like Reform are getting enough momentum to split the Tory vote.
Well, that is the problem too, and of course we still don't know, lurking somewhere in this building is a gentleman called Farage. You've heard of him?
Ah, yes, I have indeed.
What's Nigel going to do? At what point is Nigel going to say, I'm hanging up my microphone for a bit and I'm going to go and cause some trouble on the political stage? He won't be able to resist it.
Yeah, well, we shall see.
And I think a lot of our viewers would be very keen on him doing that.
Of course they would.
But ultimately,
I would be
it's
quite
going to be a
amused by
very,
it, actually.
very
It's all
low
very
turnout.
divisive,
I think it's
isn't it?
very divisive, and I think that a lot of people don't know where, the centre-right people don't know where to put their vote. I don't think they're going to feel, really, that Reform and Reclaim and all of those kind of alternatives are credible enough. I think it's going to be a really low turnout.
And the problem is, too, that, you know, look, I've always been an admirer of Rishi Sunak. I would have voted for him at every opportunity. But it doesn't mean I think he's going to be a great leader. I think the trouble for Rishi Sunak is he's intellectual, he's bright, he's experienced, but in his guts, what's he really believe? In his guts, what's he going to go out there and really fight for? And the answer, in the immortal words of that great magician of the past, not a lot.
No, that's true. He doesn't come across as passionate about anything very much.
Emma, let's move on
This is a
to
great story.
such a human story. You think this is such good news. Can you describe what's happened?
Really exciting. A little girl, an 8-year-old girl, has received a kidney from her mum. A little girl called Aditi Shankar has received this kidney at Great Ormond Street. And for the first time, doctors have not needed to give her immunosuppressants. So they did the donor from her mum, the kidney from her mum. What an amazing thing to do, to give a kidney to anybody, to give a kidney to your daughter. And they don't require her to take long-term drugs to stop the rejection of the organ.
Why?
And that's the first time this has ever really happened.
Because they've used...
People you normally... Sorry, just to sort of explain to anyone, people who normally have an organ transplant have to have immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and she did have them for a few weeks straight after the transplant, but because of stem cell miracles, you know, this is amazing stuff about stem cells, isn't it? But anyway, they took stem cells from her mother and they were able to kind of make it homely, as it were.
Apparently they put... Sorry, I've read up on this because I was so keen on this. Apparently, before they did the kidney transplant, they did a bone marrow transplant using stem cells from mums, and they put it into the daughter's marrow, so that they changed the whole characteristic of her own bone marrow, so that when they transplanted the kidney, her body thought, that's my kidney.
And it accepted the organ.
Incredible.
It is.
And she's now off, she's doing swimming, she's doing things that other children can do and feeling well, which is really, really amazing because she had a very, very rare condition. It's called SIOD, Schimke's immuno-osseous dysplasia, which meant her kidneys were failing.
And wasn't this also that the doctors and scientists have been working all over Europe, actually, and America? They've all got
work internationally on this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, can we move back... I mean, it's a wonderful story, but I don't understand it. Can we move back to something simple that I can get into my head?
Oh, well, yeah, all right, then. Rupert Murdoch.
Ah!
Oh.
Aha, well...
So the man is... Well, he's going but not going, David. A bit like yourself. Never quite steps away.
He'll go with a lot more money than I will, sad to tell you. Well, we need to go back, of course, to the beginning of this, and Murdoch buying and sort of recreating the sun. We need to remember that the attack that Murdoch has made on British civilization is quite profound, actually, because once the Sun became what it became in British tabloids, the standards really went through the floor. But there he is. He's still up there and he's still at it. If I was his son, I wouldn't buy too many bigger offices. I suspect Dad will still be running the show from behind, and he will continue for as well. As I say, he says they'll have to take him out of a box. Yeah,
he says he wants to pursue new opportunities.
Fantastic.
But he's been married about 10 times, so I guess there may be the odd opportunity
and
there.
He said
Who's to say?
You know, the papers are in great health, his corporation, and so's he. I love that as a throwaway comment.
I don't know whether to think that Murdoch is a man who has done a lot of great things for the media, and that he's brought about a number of media revolutions. But has he wielded too much political influence?
Undoubtedly, he's wielded too much political influence, and it was quite sad, really, that leading British politicians had to go to wherever he was hanging out, and he would deliberately ask them to go to some conference of his executives so he could show, I'm Rupert Murdoch. Those people here today, gone tomorrow, I am forever.
Is it true that when a new Prime Minister gets in, of whatever ilk in this country, almost the first guest in number 10 is Rupert Murdoch.
No, absolutely. I mean, John Major used to say to me that he wasn't going to play that game. And actually, to be fair to him, he didn't really. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it was the Sun what won it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Was it?
No, I don't think so. But you see, it doesn't matter. What matters is, doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what people believe. It's the factoid. And the great factoid is that Murdoch's papers determine the political destiny of this country.
What do you reckon, Emma?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you have newspapers that millions of people used to be, not so much now, but used to be reading every single day, of course they're going to wield huge power. It's just inevitable. And of course, therefore, prime ministers and politicians are going to cosy up to them. I think it'll be really interesting to see what his son, what Lachlan does in terms of decisions. I suppose that's more of a media interest thing, but what they do in terms of decisions around television channels and, you know, yeah, what are the next steps? Will he want to keep expanding and pouring money into these ventures or not?
Or will he sit back and get on the phone to Dad every morning and ask him what he should be doing?
Well,
I think there's going to be quite a lot of that.
I think.
Yeah.
At least in the first years.
Yeah, you sort of think, would you dare do anything else?
Well, that's the point. Because he has got another son, and of course, in the earlier days,
James took the helm,
they were jockeying for position. Murdoch is an arch manipulator. He loves the power game, I suppose, and you know, one just has to say he's not going to stop until someone decides they've had enough of him.
It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. That's someone who is like that. I mean, is the last of his ilk, do we think?
Really, yeah.
It would be nice.
My father
to
died
think
at 92, and it is that last of the gentleman, you know, the gentleman operator. I'm not sure one would call Rupert Murdoch a gentleman, but that generation.
But we need to
still
remember,
working
too, that he
incidentally.
gets away with it being seen as triumphant. What is it? Nearly $1 billion he had to pay for... I didn't quite understand the details.
Oh, yeah,
it
was the Fox News allegations about the voting machines, wasn't it?
That's right.
700-odd million that went to one company. And
it is very impressive a man of your age retains all these facts in your head. I wish I could.
But he when
Thank you, David.
When he set up Fox News, he said that the secret is to tell people what they want to hear, not to bother to tell them the
It's
truth.
not information
But tell
in the
them what
sun,
they want
it's
to hear.
entertainment,
And yes,
basically.
exactly. And
Yeah.
it became incredibly, incredibly popular. very
Exactly,
fast.
and I think of the people, the thousands of people he's employed over the years. I think of all the people I know that work in journalism and in TV and all of that. I think that he's employed, you know,
Well, we've all
many.
We've all taken the Murdoch pound at one point or another.
Exactly.
But there you go. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. But there you go. It's just the nature of it. It is 6:45. Let's just remind you of our top stories this morning here on Breakfast.
Could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? That's what Keir Starmer appears to want should he become the Prime Minister, or so say many.
Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down as chairman of Fox News and News Corp after 7 decades.
And coming up shortly, the landlord who's owned a pub for something like 40 years and says it's only cash if you want a pint.
Yeah, so let's look at that in a bit more detail, actually, because we all like a pint, but how do you pay for it? I remember being stunned the first time I could go to a pub and pay with plastic. It's sort of quite convenient, but it's not quite the same. And as the cost of living crisis continues, more and more people apparently are now paying with cash because it is a clever way of budgeting.
But can a pub in an increasingly difficult industry really continue to trade as a cash-only business? Lisa Hartle has more.
For 37 years, Doug has owned and run the Chequers pub in Essex. It's a very traditional place, and there is one constant he's kept in place. Whilst many businesses are now accepting card-only payments, Doug is cash-only.
It saves money. Doing cards, they charge a fortune. But also with cash, I know exactly where I stand. And if you serve somebody and then their cards decline, what happens? And they've got no cash. You lose out.
So what's the reaction when people come in here and they see that you don't take card?
They just ask where the nearest cash point is. And generally they come back. Some don't, but that's all right. They'll go down the road, they'll pay more. It's their choice. A lot more people are carrying cash because they know what they're spending. And with cards, they don't know what they're spending, especially when they're tapping their phones and tapping the card and tapping this and tapping that, and they haven't got a clue.
Earlier this month, research by UK Finance found that as cost of living concerns grow, the number of payments being made with cash rose for the first time in a decade.
We've seen a very long trend of reducing cash payments year on year, but last year we did see a small increase in the number of payments made. And as I say, we think that that's mainly due to some people finding cash helpful to them to manage a limited budget when the cost of living is increasing. But it still is the second most frequently used payment method in the UK. And indeed, the rate at which it declines is actually falling. So cash is becoming concentrated amongst those people who prefer to use it and for those use cases where there aren't so many alternatives. And so we do absolutely expect cash to remain an important part of the economy in the future. And the challenge for the industry is making sure that we can still provide access to cash to those people who prefer to use it.
Despite cash usage increasing, it's still card payments that are leading the way. Damien's been a customer of the pub for many years.
I just bring cash. I've usually got cash on me anyway, to be fair, so one of those. It's nice, old school pub. I'm only young. Doug's old school, so.
So, will Doug ever relent and welcome a card reader alongside his till?
I can't say never, but I'll hold out as long as I can.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, Essex.
Well, I say good on him.
To buy, 2 glasses of wine and a pint, probably 20 or 30 pence.
Yeah, and don't you think you'd
That's
probably...
Emma Wolf's on it. Just you saying how much cash would you need for a round? You jumped the gun, Emma, but you're so excitable about it.
Yeah. Well, no, I haven't been into a pub for years and I haven't drunk for years, but I was just thinking, but pints have gone up. Pints, glasses of wine have gone up in price.
But don't you think that's
How much
interesting?
would you
If you have
need
to
in cash?
if you have to go up to the bar with 2 20s just to buy a round for your friends, I think you'd feel it more.
Yeah.
It's too easy paying
With
for
it just
plastic.
tapping and not...
But it's rather a treat that cash is coming back. I mean, I just find it so depressing. The people who've done best out of the pandemic and all of that, but they never say anything about it, are the people who run the credit card company.
Oh, yeah.
They have coined it in, and I can't think of a less deserving bunch. So if we go back to cash, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I still try and pay cash whenever I can. I'll go to the bank, draw out some money, and then I've got it in my pocket. I just don't feel easy about producing a bit of plastic for a cup of coffee or something.
No, the move. I mean, obviously GB News are massively behind this, but the move towards a cashless society is appalling.
I know.
It really does shut out.
And it gives the bank such power.
Such power, such a kind of, if they want to, they can see exactly what we're doing at all times. It shuts out older people, poorer people. It shuts out giving a couple of quid to a homeless person. How can you do that with cash? It really...
I tell you what...
Horrible move.
What annoys me is my nearest cash point, in order to get cash, charges you 65p for the
Does
transaction.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, you need to go to one that doesn't shut. I wouldn't do that.
But that's it. I don't have a major bank in my village or anywhere near. I'd have to actually get in the car and drive to a bank hole in the wall. So the nearest one charges me 65p.
And they would probably claim there is an admin cost for them.
Yeah.
Which seems odd when everything is electronic, but that's what I suppose they would claim.
Yeah, well, they claim materials and all the rest of it. I have to say, I was guilty of... I went to a card shop the other day, one of these... do cheaper cards, David, I'll tell you.
Cheaper cards?
Cheaper cards, because I think birthday cards are a right rip-off these days.
Yes, I agree.
And I bought a card, and it was 87p, and I paid for it on plastic. Because I didn't have it. Well, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any cash. So, but I did feel quite bad about that.
And my 3-year-old doesn't know what money is, really. All he sees is mummy taking out a card, tapping it. He's not going to really understand. I've tried giving him a money box and doing coins. But then kids are not really going to understand the link between money that you actually have and you pay with.
But we adults are being encouraged to give our children their own cards.
Their own cards.
That we put money on them and they get used to paying for everything with plastic.
But I think they think these cards are just magic things that pay for things, when actually, you earn that money, you take it, you put it... Do you remember you used to put it into your bank account, put it into your savings account, and then you would take it out?
I do worry, actually, David, about the next generation, if they're not getting a grasp on what money actually is and the debt that they could get into.
That's right. But my youngest son, who's now quite old, actually, I'm sad to have to tell you, But I let him have a card that was parasitic on mine. He failed to tell me that he'd lost it, that he'd reported it. So the next time I went in to buy some innocuous meal, I remember exactly where it happened, in Soho. Not only did they refuse my card, they confiscated it.
They didn't cut it up in front of you?
No, but they sort of said I couldn't have it back. And that was because they assumed, of course, thanks to my brat, that I was using an illegal card.
Stolen his card.
Oh, I wouldn't mind having a parasitic card on your account, David.
There you go.
I wouldn't lose
But
it,
those
I'll
were
tell
the-
you that.
No, but those were the
very brave to
days.
give your child a
Now I'm
card.
just
It
an
is
impoverished
that
old
impact
git.
you. Yeah.
There were briefly moments of economic, when I was sort of, had a little bit of cash, but those days,
They're long
so you
gone.
don't go, they are long gone.
Oh, that's a shame.
But don't you remember opening a birthday card and having a
Oh, a
fiver,
fiver
having
in
a
it,
fiver
yeah.
in the card, and all
Brilliant.
of that? It's lovely.
Yeah, it is one of the best treats.
Yeah. Emma, talking about what we spend our money on, beauticians. Well, I mean, not...
Well, be careful which beautician you
Yeah,
go
you've got to be careful.
Don't call her a beautician, call her an eyelash educator. She's an accredited eyelash educator, apparently. This
Right.
is a Bulgarian beautician, Vanya Gabarova, who's one of 4 Bulgarians who are being charged at Westminster Magistrates Court on Tuesday, following allegations of spying for Putin, spying for the Russians. And
How would an eyelash educator learn anything of any interest to Putin?
that's her trade. I don't know what else she's been doing
Yeah.
in her life, but yeah, there's
Well,
3
she
men and
presumably-
another woman.
She flashes her eyelashes
Maybe
at
she
whoever.
that's right, or maybe she listens as she's doing the makeup. It's quite an intimate thing.
It's probably what she does when she isn't actually at work.
Yes.
Exactly.
I suspect.
Everybody has their cover. Everybody has their,
It does sound...
front.
I would fancy a new career as an eyelash educator. And what about these? I'm getting
Oh,
Dennis
your
Healy. yes.
eyebrows are magnificent.
Yes.
Oh, eyebrows are a huge
But I
beauty
think
trade,
someone
aren't
said to
they?
me, it means you're getting old because only old men have this.
Why don't you trim them, David?
Well, because I would poke my eye out or something.
Makeup lady will do it. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Get them trimmed. The next time you have
yes,
a haircut...
because now I look at my role model here, you do have well trimmed.
I got my hair cut yesterday, and Luke said to me, "Do you want me to trim your eyebrows?" I was like, "Oh yes, please." So he does it all with a comb and a.
Look, before we love you and leave you, I've got to ask you about spam. The front page of the Daily Star says spam is in trouble. Because we're no longer buying it. And there are a lot of other old-fashioned foods that are disappearing from our supermarket shelves because, although you may think they're, old and quaint, we're just not buying them enough to keep them going.
When did you last have a tin of spam?
I've never have eaten spam. It looks revolting.
Absolutely revolting.
Yeah,
It's
we can all agree on that.
surrounded by sort of gelatinous goo.
Yeah, but also on this list, a pot noodles, and I bet you like me,
I've
David.
never had a pot
You've
noodle.
never had a pot noodle?
I have.
You, Emma.
Listen,
I lived
You've
on
never
pot
lived
I
noodles
have
at
certain
university.
standards.
Never
lived on
lived.
pot
And
noodles
pot
at
noodles
university.
fall the
It's very
wrong
easy to make
side
in
of the
your room
line.
without,
for a gourmand like me.
What about Angel Delight, David? Have you ever had Angel Delight?
But, are we talking about something you eat? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, blancmange.
Oh.
It's a blancmange. You remember? It's sort of pink or orange blancmange.
You just
You
whip
add
it
hot
up with
water.
milk. No,
mix it up.
milk.
No,
Okay.
I'm glad to say I can find dangerous things to eat without getting quite that far down.
Oh, David, you've never lived. You come round to Dixon Towers, we'll give you a pot noodle.
Noodles
and an Angel
smash.
Delight.
And smash.
Yeah, we'll show you how it's done.
Smash!
Toad in the hole.
No, I did have smash.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Brilliant stuff. Look, we've got to leave it there. Emma Wolf, David Miller, really good to see you. We'll catch with you a little bit later.
Do stick with us, but right now you'll want to know all about the weather. Aidan McGivern has your weather forecast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day. The showers will transfer east so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east. Odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. And it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned. But nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid-Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland, Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend, plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, we've plenty more to come for you, including all the latest on this Keir Starmer saga and what he's said about Europe. Is he indicating he would try to get us back into the EU, make us a bit closer?
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd of September. Today, could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer appears to want if he becomes Prime Minister. Catherine Forster's following the story.
Yes, Keir Starmer has said that he does not want to diverge from EU rules and regulations, leading some to question whether Brexit would be safe under a Labour government.
Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down as the chairman of Fox and News Corp after 7 decades. We'll be looking back at his journey as one of the most influential global media moguls.
The toast of France. The King and Queen begin the last day of their royal visit. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is with them.
After 2 successful days in Paris, the King and Queen will be travelling to Bordeaux this morning to visit a British-run organic vineyard and highlighting the links between British and French defence.
Well, il pleut, doesn't it, in France? But Aidan's got our weather.
It's another day of dodging downpours, but it won't be an entirely wet weekend. I'll have all the details in the forecast coming up.
And Paul has got the sport for us this morning.
Well, peut-être. I don't even know what that means. Liverpool, it's all in Europe. Liverpool, West Ham and Rangers are winning Europe. And as far as the golf is concerned, we've got the Solheim Cup. European women play against the USA, hoping to win the 3rd Solheim Cup in a row, and they tee off in about 15 minutes.
Lovely stuff, Paul. Thank you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, Save Our Spam has got you going across the UK this morning.
has.
Glenn says, my ears perked up when you said spam might be leaving the shelves. I love spam fritters from Iceland. They're absolutely delicious. I hope they stay around.
And Marie says, I always buy Spam Light.
Oh.
And I've also seen frozen Spam fritters in the supermarkets.
We're even getting some response from down under this morning. Jim in Australia says, spam is very popular in Hawaii. They go nuts about it. They call it Hawaiian steak.
Hawaiian steak. We could rename it, rebrand it, and maybe we'd buy it.
Maybe.
Steve in Solihull says, I had a fried spam sandwich at the Butty Bar last week.
Got a Butty Bar?
A Butty Bar in Solihull. Solihull's a bit posh. So if you've got a Butty Bar in Solihull, he said it was amazingly good. First time I've had spam in many years. Hopefully won't be the last. I can see when it's fried, it might be tasty because it's so fatty. It would fry up very well. Well, it would.
There you go.
My necklace keeps moving.
I quite fancy a chip butty, actually. I was offered a chip butty last night and I turned it down.
It's like a crisp butty. I mean, there are things that are completely wrong to put between two layers of bread, but they're gorgeous, aren't they?
So wrong it's right.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. Our main news this morning, the video clip that everyone's talking about. It's the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. It was filmed last weekend, posted on social media, and is being seen by some as confirmation that Labour wants closer ties with the EU.
He was actually speaking at a conference in Montreal, and he appeared convinced that to achieve a stronger Britain, both the EU and the UK would need to work on common goals, like climate change and immigration. This is what he said.
Most of the conflict with the UK being outside of the UK arises insofar as the UK wants to diverge and do different things to the rest of our EU partners. Obviously, the more we share values, the more we share a future together, the less the conflict. And actually, different ways of solving problems become available. You know, actually, we don't want to diverge. We don't want to lower standards. We don't want to rip up environmental standards, working standards for people at work, food standards, and all the rest of it. So suddenly, you're in a space where, notwithstanding the obvious fact that we are outside of the EU and not in the EEA, there's a lot more common ground than you might think.
Let's head to our Westminster studio and our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Morning, Catherine. I mean, wasn't divergence the whole point of Brexit?
Well, many people would say exactly that. We were sold take back control, weren't we, of our money, our borders and our laws. So many people would say, well, if we're going to follow EU rules and regulations, then what is the point of Brexit? Now, Labour would be quick to point out that we haven't actually diverged yet, but the door is currently open. Now, I think a lot of what Sir Keir Starmer was saying in Montreal wasn't controversial in that, yes, of course, we need to work with our neighbours across in Europe on shared challenges. But it was those 5 words, wasn't it? We don't want to diverge, that really has set the cat among the pigeons. Now, the Conservatives have come out and basically said Brexit is under threat. A Labour government would reverse Brexit. Labour are saying, no, absolutely not. We are out. We accept that. But we want to work on getting a better trade deal. And of course, Labour are very mindful. There's a looming general election. All those red wall voters that went over to the Conservatives because they wanted to get Brexit done, as Boris Johnson promised. Labour need to win back a lot of those voters if they are to get a majority in the next election. So they have a fine line to tread. And I do think there may be some alarm bells ringing now among some of those voters about what Labour's real intentions are.
After what Sir Keir Starmer there was recorded saying, what if he did become the next Prime Minister, what do you think that would mean for the Brexit problems surrounding Northern Ireland?
Honestly, I don't know that it would make much difference because as things stand, because we have kept the option to diverge, The Northern Ireland is in the single market still of the European Union and subject to those laws, which means that there is this de facto border down the Irish Sea. Now, Rishi Sunak, with the Windsor Framework, has said that it's much less onerous than it would otherwise have been. But really, unless we are going to go into some formal arrangement with the EU to agree not to diverge, I can't really see things changing in Northern Ireland. And another point about Northern Ireland, the Irish PM Leo Varadkar is very sceptical of power sharing getting back up and running anytime soon. Chris Heaton-Harris, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, says that progress is inching forward. But the Democratic Unionist Party, of course, that collapsed power sharing over their concerns about the relationship, this border down the Irish Sea, are still not happy with the Windsor Framework at all. But it's not just that. If and when they go back into power sharing, they will no longer have a majority. It will in fact be Sinn Féin who is the largest party, and that will be very difficult for them indeed.
OK, Catherine, for now, thanks very much indeed.
You've been in touch on this one. Actually, do get in touch with your views. Phil says it's the government that has not taken Brexit seriously. By refusing to get rid of EU legislation, it has paved the way for Labour to, and as good as makes little difference, rejoin the EU.
Christine says, we voted for Brexit. What right has Starmer got to try to get closer to the EU? Well, I guess, Christine, if he says that's what he wants to do and then still gets elected, he'd take that as a mandate.
So if you've heard what he said there, has it changed your idea about the way you would vote in an upcoming general election? As usual, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, the media mogul Rupert Murdoch says he's stepping down as chairman of Fox and News Corp. His eldest son, Lachlan, will now lead both companies.
In a memo sent to employees, Murdoch said the time is right for him to take on different roles as he is set to transition to the role of chairman emeritus of both firms in November.
Well, Breakfast Dean Spencer takes a look back at his 7-decade run as one of the most influential men in the media industry.
Born in Melbourne in 1931, Murdoch developed an interest in the media at a young age. While at Oxford University, he tried to buy the student newspaper. His father, Sir Keith Murdoch, one of Australia's most distinguished newspapermen, died in 1953 and left the family a controlling share of a single The Adelaide News. Rupert returned from Britain to run it aged 22. He quickly expanded the business, buying a string of other titles, but Murdoch's ambitions were global. In 1968, he bought the UK's News of the World, The Sun, and by 1986, The Times and The Sunday Times. His papers were accused of political manipulation. A television revolution followed as Murdoch went on to launch the satellite TV service Sky. But Murdoch had his eye on a bigger prize and began to focus on the US, where he gained a foothold in 1976 with the tabloids The New York Post. In 1985, News Corp bought 20th Century Fox. By the late 1980s, Murdoch's empire had racked up near crippling debts, but it survived. Murdoch faced further criticism in 2011 when journalists at his UK newspaper, The News of the World, were found to have hacked the phones of countless celebrities and of the murdered teenager Millie Dowler. Members of the House of Commons Culture Committee described him as not a fit person to exercise the stewardship of the major international company. The News of the World was no longer, and he sold his shares in Fox and Sky. But even with the dwindling empire, the Murdoch's family net worth is currently estimated to be $14.1 billion by Forbes magazine.
Well, joining us now, Australian political commentator and columnist Andrew Bolt. Good morning to you, Andrew. What do you make of all of this? I mean, because he's not really stepping down, is he? He's just taking a slight step back.
Yes. Well, part of this is, of course, to allow his son Lachlan to establish himself as the undisputed heir, because obviously there are family rivalries at play here. Maybe it would have been handier if he'd been more definite about really stepping back, but he made it very clear in his message to the staff that he will be there even on Friday afternoons in the office ringing around. But I think the focus, while it's been largely on Rupert Murdoch, this is really an attempt to cement Lachlan there as the new undisputed boss of both Fox News and the news empire of newspapers around the world. So that is what really is at stake here, and I think we should play very careful, look very carefully to the reaction from James Murdoch, how he is taking this news.
Yes, I mean, of course, he started his empire there in Australia, didn't he? What do Australians think of this news today?
Well, I don't know. I mean, as long as the newspapers keep going and the Sky News down here, not your Sky News, our Sky News, keeps going, everyone will be happy. I don't know if there's going to be any noticeable transition that consumers will notice, and that's what Rupert's trying to make clear as well in his latest statement. But the thing is, Rupert Murdoch, what an astonishing career. You mentioned there, Stephen, how he started with a newspaper in Adelaide. You've got to make clear that Adelaide is just like, imagine Newcastle. It's nowhere near the hub of power. It was the second newspaper there with just 75,000 readers. And from that, he has spun this enormous media empire around the world. And he's done that really by spotting big gaps in the ideological market in particular. You recall when he went to London first, buying up the Sun and turning this is 55 years ago, into almost a weapon against the smug elites. And that was his first dramatic statement, we won't bow down to the privileged enclaves anywhere, never. And then 55 years later, having spotted a similar gap in America with Fox News, which is his big money-making operation, again giving, smiting the unrighteous, smiting the elites, and giving the ordinary person an alternative political view to the left-wing sort of smothering blanket of opinion. That is what's really made him so powerful and so rich. And again, now he said in his announcement last night that, again, he's an enemy of the elites. He's always been a revolutionary, ever since he was at Oxford and had a bust of Lenin on his mantelpiece.
I'm intrigued by your comments about Lachlan and James, because obviously when James was appointed the boss of Sky here in the UK, however many years ago that was now, that caused a lot of ripples, didn't it? Because people were thinking Lachlan would get that, and he didn't. He seemed to have fallen out of favour, and now it's swung round the other way. So what do we know about what's going on in the family dynamic?
Well, obviously there's been quite a few tensions over quite a few years. I mean, James has he's on the left, Lachlan's a conservative. James is very much a global warming fanatic. He's complained about the coverage of global warming issues by Murdoch outlets, particularly mine and me personally, I guess. But Lachlan, of course, represents more continuity with his father, that they represent people that want a variety of voices on their outlets, and that includes conservatives who are largely excluded from quite a few other media outlets.
Australia has become known as where we seem to get our global media moguls from. I mean, you've got Rupert Murdoch, Kerry Packer and others. Have you got any more in the pipeline we should be warned about?
Lachlan.
Maybe.
Watch out. I mean, it's interesting, the transition to Lachlan is going to be interesting. Well, it's been in the making for a while. Rupert Murdoch is very much, as a force of nature, really, very out there, doesn't mind getting in front of a camera now and then and giving what for, speaking his mind. Lachlan's a much more introverted person. It's a great struggle to get him to stand in front of any camera. I would wish that he'd project himself more. You might see him more, but he does share a lot of his father's political views, and I think that is what has made him, rather than James, the heir apparent, because James is more, I think, a censorious type, which is really weird because that would be cutting, really making damage to Fox News. What are you going to do? Censor that? That would lose its competitive edge. And the same with many other of the Murdoch brands in Australia, for instance. It's that cheekiness, that taking on the establishment, taking on, well, a little bit like you guys at GB News. You represent the kind of outlet, I think, that Rupert Murdoch would have loved to have had.
We'll take that as a compliment. Really good to see you this morning, Andrew. Thanks very much indeed. Appreciate it. Now, there's lots going on politically today and a lot of hoo-ha over Keir Starmer, of course, and what he's had to say. Let's get the view of the Minister of State for Food, Farming and Fisheries, Mark Spencer, who joins us this morning. Really good to see you, Minister. Can we ask first and foremost about Keir Starmer? Is he really saying, as the Mail is saying today, he's let the cat out of the bag on Brexit betrayal, or is he just working towards a better relation to create a stronger Britain?
Well, I think that's one of the problems, isn't it? We don't really know what he's saying. He's flip-flopping about. One minute he's saying he wants to have free movement, then the next minute he's saying he wants to control our borders. He doesn't seem to have a clear policy, and he seems to make it up on the hoof on occasions. So I think clearly it's very difficult to define what he does stand for. And I think he seems to be, to me, obsessed in getting into power, but doesn't really have a principle to get him there. And I think that's the real danger of the Labour Party.
Isn't it only sensible to maybe not cosy up to EU countries, but at least to get an entente cordiale, which clearly he was doing, to become friendly with them? Because we do have to do business, don't we?
Well, and of course, that's what we're doing. We're doing business with our friends in the EU all the time. That's why the Prime Minister was able to negotiate the Windsor Framework to sort out the challenges of Northern Ireland, because he was able to have those conversations with our friends in the EU. So having good relationships with our neighbours and our friends next door, of course, is the right thing to do. But we're not going to be ruled by them. We're not going to accept their rules. We're not just going to align because they changed their rules. We're an independent country. We just stand on our own feet and respect our neighbours as they respect us.
I mean, one of the big questions here is going to be, though, when people are looking towards the next election, because, you know, the starting pistol might not have been fired, but it's been loaded. We know that much. Is on the Europe issue, which is still very important to a lot of people, who do you vote for? Because we're not really sure what anyone stands for particularly. Brexiteers aren't happy with what the Conservatives have done with Brexit. Are Remainers going to be happy with Labour? Are Brexiteers going to be happy with Labour? Nobody knows what to do.
So we've got to move on from those labels, haven't we, of Remain and Brexiteer. I think we've got to acknowledge democracy happened. The country voted to leave the EU. The Prime Minister is we're delivering that Brexit, and now we are an independent country, separate from the EU, but we can still trade with them and still cooperate with them, but on our own terms. And I think that's the right relationship, the right balance. And I think to keep obsessing, as the Labour Party do, over Brexit and looking back with sort of pink tinted spectacles and talking about following their rules, I think just takes us back in time. We've just got to get over the fact that we voted to leave the European Union. We need to embrace that, make the most of it as we are doing, and stop sort of looking backwards as the Labour Party appear to want to do.
Can I just point you towards the front page of The Guardian today? It says that campaigners are already planning huge legal challenges against Rishi Sunak's, what they're calling a U-turn on green policies. There it is. He is very likely to come up against lawyers and a huge legal framework defending those green policies, isn't he?
So, of course, I mean, let's be clear. We are committed to getting to net zero by 2050. That's what we said we will do. We're going to do that as a modern leader in global politics. We're actually way in front of many of our leaders. We're actually cut our emissions higher than any other country in the G7. But, of course, we're going to do that at a pace at which my constituents and normal people can afford and can cope with. And I think what we're seeing here is a pragmatic Prime Minister who understands what it's like and the challenges that people are facing, just saying, look, of course we're going to get there, but we're going to use technology, we're going to use innovation, when we're not going to put people through this huge amount of pain and expense, which they clearly can't afford on the back of a global pandemic and a war in Europe. It's just about pragmatism, and I think that's what you get from Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. You get a pragmatic, common sense approach.
Can I ask you about something within your remit? Because within the last sort of day or so, there's been this open letter sent to 6 supermarkets, hasn't there, by farming groups, really concerned about how they're treated, how suppliers are being treated. And I mean, a survey of British fruit and vegetable farmers found almost half, 49%, are concerned they're going to go out of business in the next 12 months. But particularly as an properly independent country now, we've got to look after our farmers, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And they are, I mean, they've done a very good job at keeping us well fed since the Second World War. We've got used to, as consumers, of having good quality, low priced food on our supermarket shelves. Now, so the system has worked very well for sort of 60 years. But I think it is fair to say there is a power imbalance. And certainly as a government, we've been looking at this. We've done an investigation into the dairy sector, for example, and we're going to legislate to put in place, if you like, an ombudsman to look at some of those contracts within the dairy sector. We said we'll do the same within the pork sector as well, and we're just starting to look at eggs and fresh produce, as you indicated, within horticulture, because we've got to have those farmers for the future. They've got to be profitable and they've got to be able to keep us well fed, and we need that balance of risk and reward spread evenly from primary producer through the processor and the retailer.
I mean, I know it's your job, but do you really think politicians at Westminster understand how difficult it is to be a farmer? You only have to look at Jeremy Clarkson's farm, and a lot of farmers are saying, thank goodness somebody, at least, very high profile in the media, has been able to show ordinary people how incredibly difficult it is to provide food from our own country. Do you think politicians generally at Westminster understand?
So I think unless you've been a farmer, you don't actually know how difficult it is. And I know you mentioned Jeremy Clarkson, but I think Jeremy is assisted by the fact that he's got a huge television company behind him funding some of those exciting things he puts on the screen. Actually, when you're out there day and night and it is your livelihood at risk, and losing an animal costs you a huge amount of your future income, I think then you understand the pressure that you are actually under. And it is very difficult. You're battling the weather, you're battling the challenges of selling that product for a profit, and it is very difficult. But let's be grateful that those farmers are out there day and night keeping us fed, because they've done it very well for the last 60, 70 years. We need them to be successful in the future to continue to keep us well fed and to continue to look after our environment. And sometimes we take that for granted, don't we? Those beautiful rolling landscapes we see in North Yorkshire and the Brecon Beacons, they're only there because of the farmers that have sculpted that landscape in the way in which they produced our food.
Well, it's your job to look after them, isn't it, though?
Yeah, and that's what we're doing. That's why we're investing literally £2.4 billion a year of taxpayers' money is going into our farming sector. I take something I take very seriously. We're developing new schemes to help those farmers to invest in new technology, to also look after the environment and to continue to produce food. That's why we are investing all of that cash, and we're constantly listening and helping and supporting and trying to work out ways in which we can work together.
But what we are seeing in this country, and I know it's slightly convoluted because there are different supply chains and all the rest of it, but we are seeing this massive food inflation now, which is affecting so many people so badly in this cost of living crisis. How much of this do we think is down to Trussonomics and that disastrous budget in Liz Truss's short tenure as PM?
So not at all. This has been coming for a very long time. I think global population is continuing to increase. So on the back of that, we've got the challenges of climate change, and then if you throw into the mix a global pandemic and a war in Europe, that's what's really driven the price of energy and of food through the roof. That's why I'm saying we need to invest in our farmers, in our UK food producers, to make sure that they have the best technology, the best stock, the best technique techniques and, of course, taxpayer support to continue to produce this great food. And that's what the government is doing. We constantly talk to the NFU, to the CLA, to farming representative groups so that we understand the challenges that they're facing and we can help and support them, because we want them to produce food, but of course we want them to look after the environment at the same time, and those things go hand in hand.
Before we let you go, one of the front page of the Star this morning is talking about old-fashioned food, which is going out of fashion, things like Spam, right? Which apparently we're not buying. So I want you to be absolutely 100% honest with me, Mark Spencer, and give me yes or no answers to these. Have you got these in your food cupboard, either in London or in your constituency? Spam?
OK.
Have you got Spam? No. Bovril?
No.
Corned beef?
Bovril? No, I don't think I've got Bovril.
No.
Corned beef I may well have.
Rice pudding?
But rice pudding?
Yeah.
I definitely will have rice pudding, yeah.
Semolina?
Yeah.
Tinned peaches?
No, not a chance. Tinned peaches. No, I do like fresh peaches, to be honest. You know, I mean, I am blessed in that my the farming business at home has a farm shop, so we have access to a lot of fresh produce, and I think
Good answer.
no, I'm very lucky in that respect.
So I'm guessing you haven't got Smash?
Absolutely not. I've got a shed full of potatoes.
Angel Delight?
I've not got. I mean, you're actually talking about quite a lot of processed food here.
Yeah, it's processed.
We do need to try and we need to move people in the direction of eating fresh produce if we can.
Forever the politician. Then here's your last one, and you better say yes to this. Pot noodle.
Pot noodle. I've got a cupboard full of pot noodles.
Hey!
I've got, teenage kids.
Good man. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
Mark Spencer, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
You didn't ask him if he had couscous.
Couscous.
Balsamic vinegar.
I get told off when I say couscous. My mother says it's couscous.
No, it's couscous.
Is it couscous?
Well,
she'll be watching,
imagine.
you know.
Well, I'm sorry, I think it's couscous.
I don't know, but I also get told off for saying Bourbon biscuit. Apparently it's Bourbon.
Bourbon, yeah.
I say Bourbon.
Well, you're being a bit too French, maybe.
Bourbon.
But we've also learned that Lachlan Murdoch is probably Lachlan, haven't we?
Lachlan.
After speaking to an Aussie this morning.
Yeah.
So there you are.
Lachlan.
Yeah.
We'll try and get that right. In the meantime, let's see what's happening weather-wise for you today. Here's Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day, the showers will transfer east, so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east, odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. And it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland, Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend, plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
We'll have more on the royal visit. They're in Bordeaux today, that's the King and Queen. Our Cameron is with them. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Therefore,
what you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
7:34, morning to you.
Yes, morning. And the King and Queen have been in France doing an entente cordiale and going down very well. Actually, they're in Bordeaux this morning, where is also our royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Let's find out what's going to go on today. Hi there, Cameron. How's it going? Oh, still raining.
Still raining, il pleut. We have had awful luck with the weather, and the King and Queen seems to have brought the British weather with them. Nonetheless, it has been a very warm welcome from the King and Queen in Paris over the last few days. Everyone from French citizens to French senators and President Macron and the First Lady of France as well. And you only have to look at the reaction to his speech in the Senate yesterday, the first British monarch to address the senators in the chamber. The standing ovation lasted for a minute and a half before the King could sit down. That just gives you an idea of how pleased the senators were with his speech, where he talked about the French tributes to his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and I quote, the unprovoked aggression from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But security has been incredibly tight here. Thousands of police officers on the streets. I have never seen anything like it from covering royal visits, and journalists who've been doing this a lot longer than I have been saying the same thing. Because if you remember, 6 months ago, the building behind me, Bordeaux town hall was set alight. It was on fire, in flames, over those French riots due to those pension reforms, or sparked by those pension reforms. And the French government were forced to ask the king to postpone his state visit here. Pretty embarrassing for them, but nonetheless, they're very happy that it's going ahead now. But that is perhaps why the security is so tight here. The French government want this to go without a hitch. Today in Bordeaux, the King and Queen will be visiting a British-run vineyard, an organic vineyard which uses solar energy and develops carbon capture. So something that King Charles is really keen and passionate to go and visit. They're also going to be joining a reception on a Royal Navy frigate in the ports here in Bordeaux, highlighting the links between British and French defence, because of course both countries are part of NATO. But to start off with, His Majesty and the Queen will be here in Bordeaux city centre, having an official welcome from the Mayor of Bordeaux. Lots of school children singing and all sorts, so lots to look forward to this morning.
Lovely stuff, Cameron. Thank you very much indeed. Keep that brolly up. In the meantime, let's have a look through the sport this morning. Paul Coit is here. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning. Liverpool, West Ham and Rangers in Europe last night. They all won. We had Aston Villa lost. Brighton lost at home to AEK Athens. And Anne, I've been working on it for you.
Ah, yes, because I wanted to know what the AEK stands for.
It is Athletiki Enosis Konstantinopoulos.
Oh, well done.
Which is Athletic Union of Constantinople, and the reason it's Constantinople is because the Greco-Turkish War from 1919 to 1922, the Greek refugees that then moved back to Greece, and that's where they started the team, and that is why it is named as it is.
I love it.
I'm bored already, Paul.
OK, fine.
Let's talk rugby.
OK, Rugby World Cup. Well, all the home nations are in action. I mean, some great games coming up. Owen Farrell returns after he's banned, remember, from the high tackle, so after he's been banned for 4 games. He comes in, but that means George Ford, who's been brilliant for England, means that he's left out instead of him. But the games, we've got England versus Chile, which is on Saturday. Ireland, which is going to be a huge game against South Africa, which are probably the 2 finest teams in the World Cup we've seen so far. Scotland against Tonga on Sunday, and I've been told off so often, especially last week, why have you not mentioned Wales? Why have you not mentioned Scotland? Whereas Wales, huge game for them. They're going to be playing Australia, who got beaten by Fiji last week. So Eddie Jones, is he the real deal for Australia? A lot of the Australians don't think so.
It's almost like anything could happen in rugby, isn't it?
We shall see.
Absolutely.
Short and sweet this hour, Paul, but we'll catch up with you in an hour. Thanks very much indeed.
We have a packed programme for you. Next is Headline Makers.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day.
The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Time for the headline makers here on GB News Breakfast, and we're joined by former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and the writer and columnist, Emma Wolfe. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Let's start with something cheery, David. In the Telegraph this morning, tax cuts. Sound great.
Virtually impossible.
Virtually impossible.
On the front page of the Telegraph, it says they're virtually impossible.
Well, that's going to cheer us up.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think it's inevitable because what has happened under this government is they've lost control of public expenditure. And the problem also is that if you are not, if you're borrowing money because you're not actually paying for what you're spending, you're lumbering future generations with the cost of it all, well, then you get a situation where the government has to borrow to balance the books. And because the money that they're talking about is so huge, there's still a suggestion that he's 10 billion better off than he thought he was going to be. But yes, you see, borrowing so far this financial year, 69.6 billion, is 11.4 billion less than predicted by the Office for Budget Responsibility. But I think that's because a lot of these people play with figures, but they don't actually necessarily get the fundamentals.
But can there be expectation management into a headline like this? Because presumably there's got to have to be a promise of a tax cut before the next election.
How could a man like you become so cynical? But yes, I mean, I think you're right about that, because there's no doubt about it. You know, it's wonderful story about Winston Churchill, who never used his cigar until he got ready to go up onto the platform to deliver a speech to an excited crowd. And he stuck a huge cigar in his face, lit it up and said, "Never forget your trademark."
That's what happened.
And the trademark of the Tories
is his pipe, isn't it?
Yes, well, he apparently used to use his pipe in order to have thinking time when he was asked a tricky question. But the point is, the Tories have a trademark, but under this lot, the Tories' trademark has become confused. It seems to be, let's spend more than Labour could. And I think that if the Tories don't have a few rabbits to pull out of a hat that appear to be proper Tory rabbits, not spurious rabbits which they've suddenly dragged in, poor things, from some cage somewhere in order to give themselves a chance, the traditional Tory tune that the public, they can sing and the public can hum is tax cuts.
Yeah. Well, talking of all things political, David, you two hang with us just for a sec, because we're going to talk Liberal Democrats now, because they're starting their autumn conference. They're going to set the scene for the general election campaign. They're talking about healthcare, of course, which is going to be, well, it's important to all of us, isn't it?
Yes, well, of course it is. Let's go now to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for education, who's Munira Wilson. A very good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Yes, health obviously has always been a Lib Dem major subject, hasn't it? Are you going to be saying anything new, though?
Well, we'll be setting out our plans to ensure that
everybody has the right to see a GP within 7 days. We'll also be setting out plans to improve the nation's public health so that people stay healthier for longer and therefore are less needing to go to our hospitals where we already see huge waiting lists. And let's not forget the Liberal Democrats were at the forefront of setting out plans to help our social care workforce as well, to ensure that we can relieve pressure on the NHS too.
Yeah, well, we'd all love to see a GP within 7 days, but how do you actually arrange that? We haven't got enough GPs. I mean, there's no magic switch for that, is there?
No, of course, these things take time, but there are various things that can be done in terms of trying to support those who've perhaps left the GP workforce for various reasons to come back in, whether that's encouraging more part-time working, but also to boost training places in order to make sure that we're training up more GPs for the future. The problem is we've got to come up with long-term solutions to the challenges facing our NHS and ensuring that people can get to see a GP face to face. I have an elderly mother who's got lots of complex health problems and she's constantly battling to see a GP face to face, and it's really frustrating for her. And actually, if she could sit down with a GP face to face when she needs to, that would probably stop a lot of the additional appointments she ends up having and ending up in hospital unnecessarily. That's the sort of thing that we have in mind.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners actually empathise with that. Since your brief is education, can I just ask you about Rishi Sunak's plan for A-level reform? He said they're not good enough, they're not fit for purpose at the moment, and the mood is, from the sound of it, to change it to a baccalaureate. What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, what I've heard Rishi Sunak say is that everybody should study maths to 18, which is a laudable plan, but frankly, we just don't have the teachers to do it. Liberal Democrats are going to be setting out a really ambitious, positive vision for our schools this weekend and for early years childcare. And as part of that, we're calling for, and I've been calling for some time, a cross-party approach, working with teachers and professionals to look at our exam system, to indeed look at something like a baccalaureate-style qualification, because when you talk to parents, when you talk to pupils, and indeed when you talk to employers, they say that quite often our young people are not arriving with the sorts of skills that they need, the new sort of the problem solving, the creative thinking skills that we need in this highly technological world, with the AI revolution. The knowledge and the skills that our young people are often gaining are not really getting them ready for the workplace. And also, young people want to have a broader curriculum, and they're narrowed very, very early. But we'll be setting out a really ambitious plan to make sure that we're helping all young people catch up. And also, really importantly, something that I've been campaigning on for a very long time is to make sure that every child living in poverty has access to a free school meal, so that every child can turn up to school happy, healthy and ready to learn.
OK, Munira Wilson, we've got to leave it there, but really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Let's see what David Madder and Emma Wolfe make of all of that. Are you inspired, Emma, by the
No,
Deb's
I didn't
plans?
hear anything concrete, either on health or on education. I worked in educational publishing for 10 years. How many times I have seen successive governments raising the issue of reforming the exam system, making it more like the BAC. It's happening again and again and again. Do you know what? What about focusing on the education system that we currently have, not banging on about the exams? It's great, yes. If they can get students carrying on with maths and English up to 18, that would be a laudable aim. If they can make us all ready for the AI revolution, but that's just a mishmash. That's a lot of different things going on there. What about the children and the younger children as well, and early years? What about the ones in school now who've been out of school for what, 2-3 years?
I mean, there are so many fundamental
things to fix before we start saying this wonderful, glamorous thing about the BAC. You can do the BAC if you're very wealthy. You can go to a private school in London and do the BAC if that's what you want to do. You can, go to the French school, the French lycée, whatever. That's not the problem. There are far more problems.
The problem is the buildings
teachers on strike,
children are
buildings
in.
falling
Teachers
apart,
on strike,
all
and
sorts.
yes, and
the many younger children not getting free school meals, which is also a scandal.
David?
Well, I was not advised, it was part of my contract, to have to listen to this and then comment on it.
I know.
I mean, I am here to read the papers. So, to be honest with you, I was catching up with a bit of shut-eye while she was talking. And I didn't hear anything that she was saying that made me feel I was missing much.
That's extremely harsh.
I have no opinions on this matter whatsoever.
Is it fair to say it was all a bit pie in the sky and
very woolly?
airy and,
Yes, it's not exactly the start. I mean, Daisy Cooper says it's the starting pistol for the general election.
Yeah.
A bit of a sort of more of a whimper than a bang.
Could you have done maths to A-level, did you?
I did.
You did? Oh, well done. I'm terribly
wait a minute,
impressed.
maths to A-level? No, I think I got whatever you get at 7.
Could you have done maths?
No, and he was the
I mean, when I ran out of fingers, I got problems.
Well, yeah, did
I was so delighted to drop it.
Me too. I mean, I was. If
No,
you
I
said
did
to me,
English
you've got to
and
do
stuff
maths till
like that, and
18.
history, and geography. That
And
was the great
languages.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
For wafflers like me, geography was the big thing.
Oh, I didn't like geography.
No, I didn't like it, but it was not difficult. You know
I see.
It's just taught. It's just taught badly, or it was in those days. In fact,
Yes.
I can't think nowadays of anything more exciting than geography
Really?
to do. Well, yeah, no, I mean travelling and learning about countries and people.
Yeah,
That's not
but
the way it was
the
taught.
geographers I knew were sent off to dull towns and were made to do little urban traffic
because
surveys
this
and
is,
things.
I can tell you, because living down in the Isle of Purbeck, by the way, do visit the Isle of Purbeck, folks.
Beautiful, yeah.
English weather. I only caught the flu 3 times this last week. Anyway, you walk along Studland Beach and you're having a nice time, and suddenly a bunch of kids come out of the nearest sand dune and they're doing sort of some kind of geography field trip, and I'm thinking, why don't they go and do it somewhere else?
Oh no!
David, come on.
At least they're out. At least they're outside and out and about and looking at things.
And looking for fun.
Yeah, that's bad, you know.
Classroom with a
Poor old things like me don't want kids leaping out of sand dunes.
Well, no.
No, but they should be. That's what
Comes
they
as
should
a
be.
shock.
Absolutely.
Can we... I don't know what our timings are here, but...
I think we've got time to talk about this lost oil painting.
Oh, go on
Because
then.
it was a constable.
Ah, this is an amazing story, uplifting story. This is a constable, a detail. You know the Hay Wain by Constable, the big masterpiece?
The most famous.
No, I don't know.
Everybody knows the Hay Wain. You'll know it if you see it.
Will I?
In that painting...
It's a country landscape.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
In that masterpiece, there is a little house, which is called Willie Lott's house. And this painting of Willie Lott's house has been found in Guernsey. It was bought by an anonymous buyer for £200,000. The guide price was 80 to 120,000, and it was found in Guernsey. Very, very exciting. It was found in a sort of dusty corner of a dining room in a terraced house.
But do we know why and how?
It was just there. Maybe it was passed down through the generations, and
someone
it was
nicked
a
it.
private buyer, and so it will remain in Guernsey.
I'll tell you what, I want a good ruffle through your house, David, because I bet you've got something special.
Actually, we do.
Oh, don't say
I mean, I
anymore.
do collect
Yeah.
Oh, do you actually do you?
Oh, I do.
Oh, I'd love to be
And
able
do.
I
We
tell
have
you
all
what,
the Bloomsbury
if you're
heritage,
interested
paintings.
in 18th century English porcelain, I'm the man for you. I told a woman that was my hobby. She said, not very masculine hobby, is it? But
Oh, for
there you
heaven's
go.
sake, it's
Yeah.
art.
What does it matter? Oh, lovely. We're definitely coming down, David.
Well.
You better check my bags on the way out. That's all I can say to you.
Absolutely.
We'll see you two a little bit later on.
Yeah,
Thank
right.
you.
No, let's catch up with the weather. Here's Aidan.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day, the showers will transfer east, so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east, odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. And it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland. Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend. Plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, you know, here on GB News, it is all about you. It's all about the great British public. We're members of the great British public as well.
Yes, we are, rather.
One of us. And so, coming up in just a moment, we're going to meet our brand new People's Panel. So we're getting real people's views on the key stories of the day. That's all happening in just a moment.
You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd of September. Today, could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer appears to want, should he become Prime Minister. Catherine Forster's following the story.
Yes, Keir Starmer has been caught on camera saying that he does not want to diverge from the EU, begging some to wonder whether Brexit would be safe under a Labour government.
The toast of France. King Charles and Queen Camilla begin the last day today of their royal visit. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, is with them.
Thank you.
Well, the rain certainly won't be dampening the King and Queen's spirits when they arrive in Bordeaux later. Highlights include visits to a British-run organic vineyard and highlighting the links between British and French defence.
Coming up, how worried should the Prime Minister be about a by-election in Tamworth next month? We'll be hearing your views with our People's panel of local business leaders.
And while it rains in France, let's find out what's going on here. Here's Aidan.
It's another day of dodging downpours, but it won't be an entirely wet weekend. I'll have all the details in the forecast coming up.
And Paul's got the sport for us this morning.
That's not funny. Liverpool, West Ham and Rangers all win in Europe, and actually Europe are losing at the moment in the Solheim Cup, which is in Malaga, but it's very, very early days of the golf, so nothing to worry about.
Lovely stuff. Paul, thank you. I'm Stephen Dixon. Good morning.
And I'm good morning. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
We're talking about old-fashioned foods this morning, and Neil, because Spam was apparently going out of fashion. Neil in Morecambe, I love Morecambe. Happy Mount Park and all that sort of thing. Used to go to the lights.
I don't think I've ever been to Morecambe.
Yeah,
Good morning, Morecambe.
Love it. She said, I love Spam, says Neil, but have you seen the price of it? It used to be an economical food, now it's a luxury-priced item.
Yeah.
Like corned beef.
Yes, corned beef is going up as well. John says, the other day I was in a supermarket and I saw not only shrinkflation, but I also saw a tin of corned beef costing nearly £4. I nearly had a heart attack.
Robin Watford said the boomer generation ate Spam so that our children don't have to.
Oh, absolutely, because it was the wartime food, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was tinned. It was also sent to, our troops overseas because it was tinned again.
Yeah.
At least it was nutritious.
You could probably open a tin of wartime Spam now and it'd be all right.
Do you think? I don't know about that. Jane says, hubby and I love PEK, peck. That's chopped ham and pork, similar to Spam, but more juicy. Juicy? We love it in a sandwich with beetroot, chutney or piccalilli. I always used to make ham and egg pie with it as well. Yummy. They're lovely old-fashioned foods, though, aren't they? And apparently we are buying fewer and fewer of them now, which means they're not being made so much and they will probably disappear in the end from our supermarket shelves.
Eventually.
Would that be a problem?
Yeah, I think if there's a...
Oh, can I read out the one from Australia as well? Because Aussie Beth's been in touch.
Oh, is she?
We've been talking about
Morning,
the pub.
Beth.
We met a pub. We might meet it later on in the programme, actually. The pub where they will only take cash. Aussie Beth says, a few days ago, while I was waiting for a train at Sydney's largest station, my husband tried to buy a cup of coffee. Not one single cafe, restaurant or mobile cafe stop would accept cash. After he gave them all a piece of his mind, he went to a small independent shop on the outside of the building and found it full of customers where cash was accepted. It may be a very silly thing to refuse cash.
Yeah, don't refuse. I mean, you do see it on... I see it on shops all the time now.
What do kids do if they're just buying something for £1 or... I was going to say 50p, but is there anything for 50p anymore?
No, it'd be a £1 mix now. It used to be a 10p mix back in my day.
They must be using cash,
Yeah,
surely.
I think so. Anyway, let us know. And I don't know if gbnews.com/cash is still up and running for our Don't Kill Cash campaign. You might still be able to sign up to the petition there or not. I don't know, but we've handed it in.
Oh, here's another good one. One more.
Oh.
Jan says, I went into my local cook shop last week in Tonbridge High Street and took my purse out for the cash to pay for it. They refused to take cash. I argued that it is still legal tender, but they said they hadn't taken cash for over a year. I left the cottage pie on the counter.
Well, good for you. Don't blame you either. I mean, I don't think you can force them to take cash, but I mean, it just seemed ridiculous. It is our currency.
It is legal tender.
You actually can't pay with it. Ridiculous.
Well, that's what our campaign was all about.
Well, it is indeed. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. You may have something to say about this as well. It's the video clip that people are talking about this morning. It's the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. It was filmed last weekend and is seen by some as confirmation that Labour does want closer ties with the EU.
He was actually speaking at a conference in Montreal, and he said, or at least he appeared convinced, that for a stronger Britain, both the EU and the UK would actually need to work on common goals together, like climate change and immigration. Let's hear what he actually said.
Most of the conflict with the UK being outside of the UK arises insofar as the UK wants to diverge and do different things to the rest of our EU partners. Obviously, the more we share values, the more we share a future together, the less the conflict. And actually, different ways of solving problems become available. You know, actually, we don't want to diverge. We don't want to lower standards. We don't want to rip up environmental standards, working standards for people at work, food standards, and all the rest of it. So suddenly, you're in a space where, notwithstanding the obvious fact that we are outside of the EU and not in the EEA, there's a lot more common ground than you might think.
Let's head to our Westminster studio and Catherine Forster. I'll tell you what strikes me, Catherine, on this is the idea that with divergence, with coming up with our own legislation on the environment and human rights and everything else, Keir Starmer is indicating that he believes ours will not be, the legislation will not be as good as EU legislation. Is he talking Britain down?
Well, he's saying, isn't he, that he would not want to lower standards for workers' rights, for the environment, etc. And as Labour are pointing out, we haven't actually diverged yet from EU regulations, but the point is that the door is open for us to do so. So I think in many ways, a lot of what he said wasn't very controversial in terms of working with the EU. They are our nearest neighbours on common challenges. But it was those 5 words, we don't want to diverge, that I think is really going to cause problems. The Conservative Party are already saying, this shows Labour's true colours. They want to basically take us back in to the EU. Now, Labour are saying very clearly, no, we understand that we're out. We're absolutely out. We're not going back in. But yes, we do want a close trading relationship. But of course, Brexit supposedly take back control of our laws, our borders, our money. If we don't diverge, many people will think, well, what is the point? And I think Keir Starmer, speaking in a more unguarded way than we've seen before, he's been very careful over the last couple of years in what he says about Brexit, because, of course, there's a general election round the corner. He was the sort of arch Remainer before he became Labour leader. He ran the charge for the second referendum, but he's very aware that Labour needs to win back a lot of the Labour voters that went over to the Conservatives in the Red Wall in 2019 on a promise to get Brexit done. And so I do wonder whether these words are going to cause some alarm bells to start ringing among some of those voters about what Labour's intentions really are regarding Brexit.
Yeah, do you think he actually meant for these words that he said to sort of go so public? Because he was speaking, all right, I mean, he knew cameras were there because it was a sort of streamed conference, but it was very much for sort of left-wing Canadians, wasn't it?
It was a meeting of progressive centre left leaders. It was held in Montreal last weekend. I suppose he had very much had the sense that he was among friends and like minds. So I suspect that he wasn't being as careful as he is when he's in the United Kingdom. But of course, it's been picked up now. It took a few days. He made these comments on Saturday. These comments were broken on broadcast media late on yesterday. And Labour is saying, well, basically, there's nothing to see here. We're out of the EU. We understand that. But the very fact that he's saying we don't want to diverge, I think, does raise all these questions. You know, anybody that thought we were done with talking about Brexit, I suspect that in the run-up to the next general election, we're going to hear a whole load more about Brexit. And I suspect that the Conservative Party will try to weaponise this and try to capitalise on a fear of what Labour would do about Brexit if and when they get into government.
Yeah, well, it's another dividing line to fight on, isn't it? Catherine, thanks very much indeed. I'll tell you what I find extremely confusing for those of you watching rather than listening, is you'll see it all says Canada 2020 all behind them, and that's what we have to put the little thing on to say, well, we've got the footage.
So that clip wasn't 3 years old?
It's not 3 years old. It's the name of the conference, but it's very confusing.
It is very confusing.
We had to check and double-check and recheck this morning, so it definitely isn't 3 years old, is it?
No, it's
That's
just
from Saturday.
called 2020.
Yeah.
There you go. Right, well, let's go to a couple who are doing their very best for French entente cordiale, and that's the King and Queen, because it's their last day in France. They're going to begin their trip to Bordeaux today, where they're expected to meet with communities affected by last year's wildfires.
Yes, they're also going to enjoy a little bit of wine tasting. I bet they don't spit it out, you know.
They don't, no.
It always seems a waste.
Just be a very genteel sip.
Yes. Anyway, they're doing that at a sustainable vineyard in Bordeaux. It's all in Bordeaux, where there are 40,000 Brits, apparently.
Yeah, who knew? Let's cross now to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. He's live in Bordeaux for us this morning, and it's still raining. I'm sorry about that, Cameron. But what's going on today with the King and Queen?
Yes, Anne, I might take a little trip to the vineyard myself later if the rain keeps going on. But the King and Queen have got a really packed schedule here today in Bordeaux. It follows 2 very successful days in Paris, where they are warmly welcomed by French people, senators, and the President and First Lady of France as well. And you only have to take a look at the standing ovation the King received following his speech inside the Senate chamber yesterday, the first British monarch to deliver a speech inside the Senate chamber. A minute and a half he had to remain standing for the clapping to conclude. He paid tribute to his mother and also spoke about the unprovoked aggression of Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. Now, security here in France has been incredibly tight. Thousands of police on the streets, lots of security checks and sniffer dogs and the like. And if you remember, around 6 months ago, the building behind me, Bordeaux Town Hall, was set alight on fire during those riots sparked by French pension reforms, and that is the main reason, really, why the French government asked the British government to postpone the King and Queen's state visit here to France. Very embarrassing for the French government, but now it is going ahead. The security very tight, and they're really hoping it goes without a hitch. So far, it certainly has done. Now, today in Bordeaux, as you mentioned, there are quite a lot of Brits living here. The town is actually twinned with Bristol in the United Kingdom, and the King and Queen will be visiting a British-run sustainable vineyard, an organic vineyard, which uses solar energy and develops carbon capture as well. But I mentioned something that the King said in his speech yesterday about the unprovoked aggression of Russia, and the King is going to be making a point of meeting French and British armed service personnel, highlighting the links between our 2 nations, particularly when it comes to NATO. There's going to be a reception on board a British frigate later on in the port here in Bordeaux. His Majesty and the Queen also expected to look at the impacts of the devastating forest fires that happened last year in the Bordeaux region. So lots of climate change sustainability engagements here for the King and Queen. But before all that, there's an official welcome here in a very wet Bordeaux city centre from the mayor of the town. And there's going to be performances and lots of crowds are expected.
Cameron, you've been stood out in the rain for several days now in various parts of France, and yet you seem, I've got to be honest, you seem invigorated on this visit. I mean, is that the sense that is coming across? Is there like I don't know, it's almost like the King and Queen really coming to their own with our closest neighbour.
I think they certainly are. You just have to look at the walkabouts that the King and President Macron did in France over the last few days. And everywhere they went, there were crowds willing to stand in the pouring rain to greet them at the King and the Queen at various receptions, trying to give them little toy crowns, crowds waving their union flags as well. I think they really have received a really warm reception here in France. Of course, the King, the last King of France, lost his head in the 1700s and was kicked out of the Palace of Versailles 200 years ago, which was the location of a magnificent state banquet hosted in the British King and Queen's honour by the President of France a few days ago. So they really have quite literally and metaphorically rolled out the red carpets here in France.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it's fascinating to know, because we're watching Removal Men or something behind you. Where are you in Bordeaux? What's that big building?
So the building behind me is Bordeaux Town Hall. As I mentioned, that was the building of the most famous pictures that was set on fire during the riots 6 months ago. You may just be able to make out some charred stones, but the reason there's lots of removal men and builders here is because they're erecting lots of stages in the town square. We're expecting a youth orchestra to be performing later on today. There's going to be school children, I'm told, lining the route of the King and Queen's arrival. And there, as I said, going to be a ceremonial official welcome from the Mayor of Bordeaux as well. I don't think it's going to be on quite a grander scale as the Arc de Triomphe ceremony, where the President of France welcomes the King officially a few days ago. But I think it's going to be quite a more intimate affair, maybe. But also, I think it will give the King and Queen a chance to meet more French people and indeed British expats who live here.
OK. Cameron, thank you very much indeed. Apologies for the sound just in that last little bit.
The rain has finally got to his microphone.
I think it has. Do you know what? It's a tough... I always say this with Cameron, because he always seems so... Well, it's because he's youthful.
Yeah, but it's a great job.
But it is a great job, but it's a tough job, isn't it? I mean, to be stood out on a pavement in the rain for hours and hours, it is hard, actually.
Yeah.
But he just loves it. You can tell he loves it.
Yeah, he'll be writing books soon and everything, won't they?
Oh.
Well, royal correspondents...
Become royal.
They do become royal in their own right, almost, don't they? And they... I don't know, they learn a lot about the sort of things that we find fascinating. And they end up writing books and being royal commentators. And I think they have, you know, a really good afterlife, even after they've given up those endless hours of standing outside palaces and whatever, talking about amazing events. And I think Cameron will be brilliant at that, don't you?
But it's that, what I love about it, it's that you get that sense of enthusiasm from him, which is lovely to see, because we all know, whether you're a bit cynical or not, if a royal comes to visit your town, you're out there. You stood there, you know, along the line with your flag and all the rest of it. I mean, I love it. I love it. I'd love to... When I saw the King on Coronation Day, I was just in a little spot just on my own, because the press was sort of moved to one side, so I was in a little spot just on my own and gave him and the Queen a wave. And they sort of looked at me, they didn't wave back.
Absolutely.
But it was like, lovely.
I've only ever been a royal correspondent once, and that was in Sydney Harbour at the time of the bicentennial. And Prince Charles and Princess Diana were there on the Royal Yacht Britannia. And all these beautiful old ships were bobbing around on the harbour. And I was up there in Taronga Zoo. Good morning, Australians. And I was commentating. And then Channel 9, or one of the big Australian TV channels, said she'll do, because they didn't have a royal correspondent to be able to talk about the whole thing, about what it was like to be Prince and Princess Diana and Prince Charles on the Royal Yacht and everything. So they hauled me into a studio, and I spent all day being a royal correspondent, just gossiping about the royals. It was brilliant. Absolutely fab.
I hope they paid you.
Probably, I don't know. It was just, they probably didn't, but it was just fun to be doing what Cameron Walker is doing now for his career.
You see. We should be media moguls, shouldn't we? Because we've been in the business a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
I mean, we know a lot of stuff.
And in Australia a long time.
Well, yes, but I'll tell you what, we're not actual media moguls. Rupert Murdoch is probably the only big one left now.
He is.
And he's just announced he's stepping down as chairman of Fox and News Corp. His elder son, Lachlan, is going to lead both those companies.
In a memo which was sent to all employees, Murdoch said the time is right for him to take on different roles, as he is set to transition to the role of Chairman Emeritus of both firms from mid-November.
Yeah, well, Breakfast's Dean Spencer takes a look back now at his 7-decade run as perhaps the most influential man in the media industry. Well, we can't hear that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, well, it is interesting, though, because he started his life... A lot of people think it was a rags to riches story, but it's not.
No.
He came from a very well-to-do family in Adelaide and then set up his business really just by buying a local newspaper.
Well, his dad was in papers as well,
That's
so
right. Then he built on that and gradually became very, very well known in Australia.
Has he had too much political influence?
Well...
That's the question, because whatever you think, every time there's a general election, it's the son what won it.
What won it.
Apparently.
Whether it was or not, really. But no, people in the industry in Britain think it might be, maybe not now, because he's clearly going to keep some...
Oh, of course he is.
A big influence on what his son does. But when, in the end, he may well pass to the great newspaper industry in the sky, where there'll be lots of media moguls arguing about things, I guess, they think that Lachlan isn't so interested in Britain and may well wind down British interests, including, for instance, selling The Sun. But that's for another day.
Is the Times still one of his? Oh, it must
yes,
be.
the Times is still owned by News Corp.
News Corp. Anyway, so it'd be interesting to see what happens. We'll keep an eye on that, of course, as little details emerge over the coming months. In the meantime, should we see what the weather's going to do for you today? Here's Aidan.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day, the showers will transfer east, so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east, odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. And it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland, Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend, plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
It is 8:22 and up next, this is, as you know, the People's Channel, where you get to have your say. So next, we're going to head up to Tamworth, where a by-election is due. So how are voters there feeling?
This is GB News on your TV, online and on your radio.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 8:26. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, online, on your TV, on your radio.
The by-election for the parliamentary constituency of Tamworth will take place in just under a month's time.
Yeah, this comes after the resignation of Chris Pincher. He lost his appeal against an 8-week suspension over groping allegations.
Well, our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, is in Tamworth with our People's Panel today. Good morning, Jack. What are you going to be up to? Who are you going to be talking to?
Well, good morning to you both. Welcome to this People's Panel here in Tamworth. Of course, this is the home, was going to be the home of a by-election in a few weeks' time, of course, after those allegations of sexual assault with Chris Pincher and then being suspended by the House of Commons, which means this constituency here in Tamworth is without an MP. And so that by-election in a few weeks' time is going to decide very much the future of this constituency. And the people here have lots of issues, of course, that they are worried about, that they want changed, and lots of things, of course, that they want to see happen. Tamworth itself is deep in its history, of course, with the once being the Saxon capital, with Mercia as well as being a key Norman stronghold. In 1834, Sir Robert Peel, of course, the creator of the police force, wrote the Tamworth Manifesto here. Then for a by-election, we've got a by-election again now. How safe is this seat for the Conservatives? It has been a Conservative stronghold, but we're here with a People's Panel this morning to find out what the issues that matter to them are and what they're thinking when it comes to that election in a few weeks' time. So come and meet the panel now. This is the Advantage Business Networking Group. They meet here every 2 weeks and essentially discuss business and discuss all kinds of local issues together as a group. They started out with just 3 members. In 3 months, they've got over 100. So it's really great to be with you this morning. Thank you very much, everyone, for letting me interrupt your meeting this morning. Chris, let's come to you first. Your MP, Chris Pincher, was suspended from the House of Commons. Do you feel like you're in a position where you've lost trust in politicians now?
The short answer is yes. Yeah. I think for a while we felt massively underrepresented. I think it stems from, and Chris was a good MP for us for a long time. And since his role got more in depth in government, we tend to have been forgotten about. And I think I'm not just the only one that thinks that. I think that's a feeling of many Tamworthians.
Yeah, Chris, Shane, sorry, what do you make of that and the fact that you are now having to face this big decision in a few weeks' time of choosing your next MP?
Yeah, it's. I think as Chris echo what Chris said. You know, we've not been represented for many years. Christopher Pincher did a great job for many years, and then as he climbed in Parliament, we seemed to be forgot about a little bit. You know, and as a business owner and as a family man who lives in Tamworth, you know, we need someone to lead us, to help guide us and to represent us in Parliament, and we don't feel like we're getting that, so hopefully the next MP will do that for us.
Yeah, Martin, you were telling me earlier when we were having a chat this morning that Chris Pincher was a good MP for you. Just telling us a little bit about kind of your thoughts on him and kind of where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said just now that yeah, for many years he did a great job. We saw a lot of him. He represented Tamworth extremely well. But recently we've lost that. You know, we've now lost him. We're now faced with a choice of a new MP, and we need someone that's going to come in and really understand Tamworth, want to do a great job, see what the potential of Tamworth is, because it is huge. We've got problems, but we need someone in to help us and improve things, lead us forwards, and go to the next stage.
Yeah, and of course, a big part of that is trust. Now, Sue, you were telling me earlier that you're part of a Facebook group in the area which is helping to try and tackle things like crime. I mean, what could a future MP for this area do to help you make you feel safer in this area?
Okay. I think really, to be honest, it's just to get a police presence, a constant police presence within Tamworth. Our local police station has been closed down, and there's one, I don't know, about 5 miles out of the, 3 miles out of the town centre. And just walking around the streets, you know, or the centre of Tamworth, it's just not safe. There are groups of people drinking, etc., which every town has, but then there's nobody to control that. So it just needs to be safe. We just need a presence of police. Considering Sir Robert Peel, you know, brought in the police force, and we're in Tamworth, we haven't got any police present at the moment, so that would help us a lot, please.
Yeah, Brogan, I mean, how safe do you feel walking down the streets now?
I don't like it, especially in the town centre. I avoid coming to the town centre if I have to, because I don't feel safe. I don't go to the castle grounds because I don't feel safe for my kids there. It's busy, and I don't feel safe that they're just to let them run off and play. So yeah, no.
So it's that antisocial behaviour then?
Yeah, and it's stuff I see on like Facebook groups and things like that. 10 years ago, fine, wouldn't have an issue with it. Now it's just kind of had a slow decline, especially since the police station's closed down. There doesn't seem to be, people have lost faith in them and not even reporting incidents to police because they don't see the point in doing it. So the community's feeling unsafe with the seeing stuff and reporting it on Facebook instead of reporting it to the police.
Yeah. So. Okay, Shane, I mean, you were part of setting this whole group up now. As we said, you went from 3 to 100 members. Tell a little bit about what the work this group does, but then how maybe a future MP and what you'd want to see from a future MP in terms of supporting business here in the area.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that Tamworth has huge potential, you know, from a community point of view and a business point of view. We felt as a group when we set this up that we weren't being represented, and we decided that this group would be set up to represent local business owners, local business people, give them a place to vent, a place to come and get ideas, and a place to do business. And whilst we didn't have anyone representing us in the town as an MP to do that, we took it upon ourselves to do that. We've grown quite rapidly, quite quickly, but it would be fantastic to have an MP that would come and join us, come and see the best interest of the businesses that are here, because we are the heart of the community at the end of the day, so support would be really, really good from an MP.
Yeah, that's it. It's support for business across sectors. And of course, we know since COVID, as people's retail habits have changed, I guess, that footfall on the high street has particularly suffered. Like many towns across the country, Tamworth is having the same problem. I mean, Chris, you've run all kinds of businesses as well. Of course, you're a co-founder of this group as well. I mean, what could an MP do to help the high street here?
I think the first thing that they can do is actually show themselves. We've gone for so long without having somebody that we can knock at the door and go to an office and raise the problems with the person that's going to represent us in Parliament. So being visible is one of the first things, but also understand what it is that residents and business owners alike want to get from the town. What do they want to get from that support? For me as a business owner, it's knowing about funds that are available. It's knowing about how I can apply for funds. It's knowing about how I can get my business to a wider mainstream rather than just local. Something with direction, somebody with direction would bring that to us. When we set the Advantage Network Tamworth up, we made the conscious decision that it was going to be based on relationships, because relationships for us is how you do business. We want an MP that gets that. And I think if we do have the right person, as the guys have mentioned already, we've got so much potential in this town. There's so much history. There's so many entrepreneurs in the town that just want to do well. We just need a bit of direction.
Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there for the moment, but of course we are here all morning. We're getting more views from this People's Panel here in Tamworth as they face that by-election in a few weeks' time.
Lovely stuff. Jack, thanks very much indeed. It is going to be an important by-election. Let's have a look at all the candidates for that election in Tamworth.
Andrew Cooper from the Conservatives.
Sarah Edwards from the Labour Party.
Sunny Verk from the Lib Dems.
Dr Sue Howarth from the Green Party.
And Richard Kingston as an independent.
Ian Cooper from Reform UK.
And Ashley Simon from Britain First Party.
Now, if you're on a sports party, Paul Coyte is here with all the details.
Always running the party. Morning. Start with a little bit of football. We should mention Liverpool and West Ham and Rangers all did well in Europe yesterday. Aston Villa not so good, and also Brighton as well, who lost at home.
3-1.
Lost at home. But there's sport which is going on as we speak.
Oh, is there? What's
Solheim Cup. The Solheim Cup, which is... See, I don't want to call it the women's version of the Ryder Cup because it is its own cup and it's been going since 1990.
But in effect, it's the...
It's the same thing. It's Europe against the United States. So it started already, and it's the foursomes. Now, the foursomes, that means there is one ball but two players. So you share a ball, basically. You follow me?
No. Why do you share a ball? Oh, you take turns?
Yeah, you take turns. So it's alternate shots.
Right,
so that's the foursome.
Wow, that's real team
That is,
work.
absolutely. So you start with the foursome, and it's the same with the Ryder Cup as well. You have the foursome, you have the four ball, so they're always the first 2 days. So the foursome is alternate shots with one ball. Then you have the four ball, and then you have the singles right at the very end, and then basically you get a point should you win the match. Now, as far as the foursomes are concerned, with the Ryder Cup, now we had Billy, didn't we? Had Billy Foster on the show yesterday, our
He's
great
a character.
And there's been some problems because with the four ball, if you imagine, with the foursomes, I should say, you may use a different ball to what I would know if we were paired up. You might use one brand of ball and I would use the other because they're different. They are very different.
But it's teamwork. You've got to compromise.
It's teamwork. You've got to compromise. And this is the thing with the Ryder Cup is what they've been doing is actually using each other. I mean, who would have thought? Using each other's ball so they can get used to that because you can't use your own ball if you're in the foursome.
Very confusing.
Can you change choice of ball?
Absolutely.
In between?
No, you can't.
Because I was going to say you could then work it tactically, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
So if your partner is going to play and they're good at the long shot, whatever you call that, the big drive, then they might favour a particular ball.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited about this.
You know what? You are making perfect sense because there are certain balls that will actually go longer than others. You get soft balls, you get hard. Who would have thought? Hard balls, all different shapes.
But
well,
then
not
you
different
only
shapes
take
and
one
sizes.
shot.
They're all the same.
You only take one shot, though.
Stop confused.
It, Stephen.
I'm so confused.
But then you take one shot and then your partner is landed with whatever shot you gave her.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly how it is. So then you have to work very much as a team. Whereas with the four ball, then you have a ball each.
Well, there you go.
That's it.
Did
that make any sense whatsoever?
Yes, it did to me.
That's good.
It makes me want to get a high-definition television there because you'd need one, wouldn't you?
You've got one, haven't you?
Oh, it might be HD, but it's little. It's nothing like the size
Oh,
of
they took for ages.
You know, do you remember they had the all of a sudden 3D TVs were very
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I had one of them.
And for
But they've not
sport,
caught on.
it really hasn't, because all of a sudden everything, and they were starting putting sport in 3D.
Yeah.
Football, you'd kind of get a bit dizzy and get a headache. The one thing that it really worked with for me was golf, because then you see the undulations on the green, etc., and that was really good. But even then, you just get.
But the computer's very good on golf now. You know, it shows you the trajectory of the ball and
absolutely,
absolutely brilliant.
Who knew? I never knew you were all
I've just
into golf.
noticed that golf has suddenly become exciting.
And I'm going to have to do more golf because I can see the
I'm
excitement.
going to have to get a bigger telly as well. That's right.
We'll tie those two things in
So
together.
I'm cup at the moment.
Coity, you are out of time.
OK, fine.
It's been good to see you. We
It's
will
all
see you
the
tomorrow.
balls, you see. That's what it is.
It is. You'll be back on Monday.
I will be indeed.
Fabulous stuff.
OK, it's just coming up to very nearly 8:40. And we've got headline makers coming up. And actually, there's a big headline, a big story, in that James Bulger's killer's latest bid to be released from prison, as you can imagine, very controversial and upsetting for some. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne at, 8:43.
Actually, we were talking about old-fashioned foods. Let me just read this one out. The fact that Spam is going out of date and everything nowadays. Derek in Derbyshire says, I have a cupboard full of Spam and I use it for fishing. And then... that's right. Phil says, in the 60s, my mother had a special cupboard with tins of Spam, powdered milk, tins of beans, etc. This was her war cupboard. Wow. Both my parents served in the RAF in World War II, and they were prepared for the next. Dried food.
My dad did that with... he did it for, the 2000 Millennium Bug and all that sort of thing.
Oh, really?
He had a box full of food in the garage. Never needed it, obviously.
No, like I have a cupboard full of candles under the sink.
Oh, yeah.
For the same reason.
Yeah. Anyway, let's find out what's making the headlines for you today with former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and writer and columnist Emma Wolfe. Good morning, you two.
And I'm really sorry I can't talk to you about Spam.
Oh, that's all right.
I'm talking to you about whether Zelensky is going to lose without US support. A minor matter by comparison with Spam.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So he's convinced. Is he using this as rhetoric to keep them on board, or
no?
I think it's a real thing.
I think they need American support and American supplies. Don't forget they've had over $100 billion worth of American kit. But I worry about.
Sorry, $100 billion.
Oh yes.
Ooh. Why has Poland pulled out of supplying?
Well, that's an argument over food arrangements. Grain. And but look, it's the Americans that are troubling. I mean, don't forget Biden couldn't wait to become president in order then to chuck everything away in Afghanistan, and now we have a situation where the Republicans are trying, or a small group of Republicans, to cut the money that goes to Zelensky. And you sometimes wonder what these guys are on and why they're in. I mean, the trouble with America, I don't travel around American politics very much to know, it's so provincial. They think the next state is a foreign country.
Yes.
But, there's something here, this is the Telegraph, page 11, and Tim Burchett, never heard of him, not even a household name in his own lavatory, but he sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said, I appreciate Mr. Zelensky's bravado and everything, but we don't have any money. We're broke and we're giving our money away. I mean, with someone like that,
we have an awful lot more
Congress,
than Ukraine does.
exactly, and you think to yourself, at the end of the day, what has been amazing is how a man who was a comedian.
Well, he was, yeah.
I mean, a professional comedian, as against the number of amateur comedians that there are in politics. Zelensky has risen to the occasion. He has been formidable. And for him then to be let down and to give
by so-called
Putin the
professional
chance
politicians
to stand up and be back at the top. I mean, this is so crazy that even a member of the United States Congress, one of the extreme right-wing members, should understand that. And so for all that Biden was at it again, repeating the same story twice in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But at least this time, his heart appears to be in the right place. If the Russians are allowed to come back and win this battle that they stupidly took on with Ukraine, it would be an outrage.
It would be sinful, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Emma, take us to the Sun. And yet another time that it looks as though authorities are going to consider John Venables, who was, of course, one of the murderers of little James Bulger.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely disgusting. Just to recap for all of us on the James Bulger story, which we probably remember, Venables and Thompson were jailed in 1993 for the murder of 2-year-old James Bulger. They were 10 years old and they were freed at 18. John Venables is now up for parole and there's a call to make that parole hearing public. Venables is now 40. He has a new identity. Wow. But since that time, he's been jailed twice for possessing images of child sexual abuse. And he's now up for parole once again. He was denied parole in 2020. But I just think we need to really take a look at why on earth he's even up for parole again.
Well, the argument would be that we have a justice system and not a revenge system. If he's, I mean, Mistakes are made, but if he's not
Mistakes
suitable...
are made, they were 10 years old.
But if... No, I didn't mean that mistake. I mean the mistake in releasing people on parole. But if they decide he's not suitable for parole, he's likely to reoffend, they won't release him.
Anyway, I'm, as you know...
Do you think it should be public?
A famous has-been. And one of the things I was a has-been over was doing life-sentence prisoners and whether they should be released. And then the European Court of Human Rights said that decision couldn't be made by ministers, had to be made by an independent tribunal. Hence, along comes the parole board. My worry with the whole parole system is not that some people should be released, because, of course, they should be. The worry is the kind of people who get mixed up in the parole board. They're not there to keep people locked up. They're there because, for a variety of reasons, they think they should be released. And so the system is now biased in favour of releasing people. And, of course, you do get what the Home Office perhaps shouldn't have called it. In my day, they used to call own goals, which is when someone is released and then does something terrible again.
I mean, I totally get the anger and the frustration around it, and particularly for the poor family, involved in it. It must be horrific. I'm still always drawn to the fact, how do you deal with a criminally offending child?
No, and I agree with you, Stephen. That's exactly what I thought. And I looked again, and they were 10 years old. And I feel that 10-year-olds committing crimes need to be looked at again. It's the fact that John Venables has gone on twice. He's been jailed twice since then. He's now 40 years old. That's not a 10-year-old doing a terrible act,
but is that
unforgivable act. I was a child when this case happened. I now have a 3-year-old. I feel very differently. The family lost a 2-year-old boy.
Is his reoffending, what he's done, which is sexual reoffending, is that linked to the fact that he's been in prison since he was 10 years old?
Of course, yeah, and that's very likely too. And we have a problem with our prison system in that it teaches people, basically, you know, terrible behaviour and wrong behaviour and all of that. But I'm just saying, he's shown, if someone is working and showing remorse and really trying to rehabilitate their lives, fine. I don't know what Robert Thompson has gone on to do. But
well, we haven't heard.
So
I think we presume that he has not reoffended.
But they've been given new identities. Even if John Venables, when he appears, he'll have his face blurred. He'll have his voice disguised.
But it's
everything is done to protect him. What about Jamie Bolger?
But the thing about it is that all of this business about how they're given new identities, you just go online and you're told all about them.
Where they live.
Yes.
But I think there's no doubt about it. The system works. That life sentence isn't a life sentence. And a lot of offenders are released and you never hear of them again. Good news.
But they're on a life licence.
But they're on a life licence, it can be recalled. But the problem is when the system is too enthusiastic to let people go who continue to pose a risk to the community.
Isn't it because we as a society want to believe that prison is somehow rehabilitative? That's a word.
It is for some.
And of course it is for some. And we want to believe, I guess, or at least the parole board might want to give him the benefit of the doubt because they want to believe that the prison system works.
And he's proved twice, if not more. You know,
I agree with you. What should it be made public in any way, do you think, this? So that we see
Well, the family would like it to be public, and I actually think their wishes should be respected.
Yes.
A lot of these hearings are now held in public. This one isn't going to be. And you think to yourself, why is everybody bending over backwards to make it easier for these guys? And since there's no way they can keep their identity, well, it's only one of them we're dealing with, and keep his identity secret, I think it would be far better if the public were put in a position to know what was going on. And I don't believe in secret justice.
No, I
possibly.
think secret justice is very dangerous.
I'll tell you how I see this, though. It's your classic lose-lose situation, isn't it? There's no happy outcome.
No, there isn't.
No. It's a terrible...
it's awful. And you said within all of this, you've just got to think of the family and what Denise is going through.
Again and again.
I tell you one thing that I used to look at some of these a lot of these cases. I did over 1,000 life sentence prisoner cases while I was in, all of them murderers. And I would look into the background and try and see the own goals that committed a serious offence again. Was there any intimation that this might happen? And usually there was. I remember there was one where a chap committed murder for the second time. He killed his father the first time and had run round his house laughing while stabbing his father to death. And yet he was regarded as though it was just a family murder. And generally they think if it's a family murder, it's much safer to let people out. At the end of the day, I still believe very strongly that if you have doubts, those doubts must sound in favour of the public. There is no reason why someone who was killed once, whatever age they were, should be given the benefit of the doubt. If there's a doubt, keep them locked up.
Or if there's a risk to children, as there clearly is.
And I agree with you, Emma, to a certain extent, that I think Denise, the mother particularly, but there's a father as well, and I think there's brothers and sisters, that they deserve some sort of... I don't know, they deserve a say. And their say should be...
public acknowledgement of their grief and what they've gone through in the last 20 years.
Why shouldn't they have their voice actually be given
30 years. 30 years.
And it was an appalling offence.
It was just the most terrible, terrible thing.
But it was cruel and vicious.
Yeah.
And there is plenty of evidence, if you look back through these people, the cases, you can find plenty of evidence that someone who starts young continues down that track.
That's the concern. We've got to leave it there. Emma, David, thank you. It's been great to see you this morning.
Right now, it's 8:54, which is roughly 6 minutes to 9. Here's Aidan with your weather. I can't do it backwards.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day. The showers will transfer east so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east. Odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday. And it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid-Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland, Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend, plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Quick one on food. Carol says, I've always believed Marmite to be a health food. It's full of vitamin B.
I think it is.
I'm happy to go with that. I'd put it in everything.
No, horrible.
You love it.
Puts me off everything.
We've got the People's Panel heading away in just...
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd of September. So our top story this morning has been the big question, could we be heading towards a closer relationship with Brussels? Well, that is what Sir Keir Starmer appears to want if he becomes Prime Minister. We're going to be talking to the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, a little bit later.
Coming up, how worried should the Prime Minister be about a by-election in Tamworth next month? We'll be hearing your views on our People's Panel of local business leaders.
And, of course, we'll bring you a full forecast with Aidan.
It's another day of dodging downpours, but it won't be an entirely wet weekend. I'll have all the details in the forecast coming up.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We've been talking about weird food. Well, not weird foods, that's the wrong thing. Old-fashioned foods, including Spam, which apparently is... people aren't buying it the same way. Saying, what does Spam mean?
Well, Stephen Wigan says specially processed American meat. First used in World War II. Not a fan myself, he says. Is that what it stands for, Spam?
Well, others apparently say spiced ham, while some apparently it could be shoulder of pork and ham.
Yeah, I think it's more like that than specially processed American meat.
That sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? Then why do we call spam, that we get email spam, why is that called spam?
Because it's rubbish.
Is that what it is?
I don't know. I expect it is.
Oh.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it just?
I love the derivation of names and things like that. But we will find out. If you know, get in touch, please. Why is spam called spam? And why is computer spam called spam? I suspect it's because it's rubbish.
Yeah.
But we don't really know.
No, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. We're going to be talking about the EU very shortly and talking to James Murray, the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. But sticking with politics, just want to start this hour with the by-election for the constituency of Tamworth. It takes place in about a month.
And this comes, of course, after the resignation of Chris Pincher, when he lost his appeal against an 8-week suspension over groping allegations.
Well, Tamworth has long been a safe Tory seat, but will that still be the case when the votes are counted?
Well, our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, is in Tamworth with our People's Panel today. Morning, Jack. How are you getting on there? Are opinions changing as you discuss these things?
Yeah, good morning to you all. We've kind of interrupted this business meeting here this morning. So this is the Advantage Business Networking Group. They meet every 2 weeks here in Tamworth to discuss their local issues, promote, of course, the local business in the area. And we've been getting the feeling on the ground of what the kind of feeling is for this by-election in Tamworth in a few weeks' time. Of course, we've already discussed a lot this morning, particularly around the trust that this group feels that they may be having the politicians. It's certainly something, of course, that they feel needs to be changed, and there's lots of things in this area particularly that these people here that all run their own businesses are concerned about. But Martin, we've been chatting kind of all morning, haven't we, about kind of what Tamworth represents, and would it be fair to say that Tamworth has a bit of an identity crisis at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. We've got that sort of an amazing, we've said before, really amazing town centre. But is it retail? Is it experience? Is it hospitality? Because we have this sort of unique Ventura Park, which is full of really good retail stores, which is on the outskirts of the town centre. So the retail footfall, I guess, is being pulled out there, which is leaving the town centre sort of a little bit quiet and not very exciting. So if we are not going to be a retail centre, we're going to be something else. We need to invest in that. We need to champion that and encourage smaller businesses, artisan shops, restaurants to really make the town centre something to want to come and see because of all that historical importance and the amazing things that we've got here. So again, feeding into, we need an MP that comes in, understands what the plan is, and yes, that feeds into what the council are doing, and that's a different discussion, to then go back to that place in London. And if there's funding available, if there's interest, we need to really generate some huge interest in Tamworth to make it something that everyone can be proud of.
Yeah, so going back to that point, I guess we picked on earlier, that representation back in the House of Commons is something for you. I mean, Shane, you wanted to add something to that kind of identity crisis point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the guys did a great job. They won a £20 million fund for the High Street and further £10 million to move the college into the town centre, which is fantastic. What worries me is, do we have a clear direction on where that's going? You know, where's the end result? Because moving a college into the town centre is great. That also brings in a lot of footfall, but it also brings in problems as well, things like police presence. So, you know, we need to make sure that, yes, having this funding and spending this funding is a really good thing for the town centre. We need a clear direction of where we're going. And I also think it's very important to remember Tamworth isn't just about the town centre. There are a lot of businesses, small independent businesses that are actually outside the town centre, which don't necessarily get the support that they need and that they actually, you know, should be receiving from government.
That's it. I mean, for many towns across the country, that's the point that you want to pick up on, Chris, that all business just isn't in the town centre. It's all around an area which is where business lives and business, you know, tries to thrive. I mean, what are the things that you're concerned about here? What could an MP do for those businesses that are outside of the town centre here?
I think that we've got just over 5,000 registered businesses in the Tamworth area, that is in the Tamworth borough, if you like. Less than 20% of them are classed as being in the town centre. So that's 80% of all the businesses that are in and around the town centre. Yeah, all the funding that's been available recently through council schemes, through grants, has only been focused on the B79 postcode, which is town centre. So 80% of businesses haven't had opportunity to get money from government, from funds, from anything that the council's offering, because they're not part of that town centre postcode. And for me, when 80% of your business footfall is not being addressed, not being looked after, that's a huge opportunity for an MP to come in and represent, and to actually let's widen that band of what's available for businesses. Let's not just focus on the centre, because we're all business owners that use the facilities in the town, but we're not being supported in terms of money and aid. So it's not always money, but we're not being supported if you're not in the town centre. And that for me is a big misconnect.
Yeah, I mean, Martin, you're nodding your head on that point.
Yeah, and I think very quickly, I alluded earlier to the local council. An MP that comes in and is active and confident will inject some of that into a local council that really needs to step up when it comes to business, is my opinion.
All right, thank you so much for more of your views here this morning. We'll be back again with this People's Panel, talking all about and leading up to that by-election in October.
Lovely stuff, Jack. Thank you. And let's have a look at all the candidates for that upcoming by-election in Tamworth.
Right, there's Andrew Cooper from the Conservatives.
Sarah Edwards from the Labour Party.
Sonny Verk from the Lib Dems.
Dr Sue Howarth from the Green Party.
Richard Kingston as Independent.
Ian Cooper is standing for Reform UK.
And Ashley Simon from Britain First Party.
Now, there's lots of talk this morning about the EU and about Brexit. Why? Because Sir Keir Starmer was recorded at the weekend saying, we don't want to diverge from the EU. So let's talk to Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, who joins us now. Very good to see you this morning. What was Sir Keir talking about?
So look, I think what Keir was talking about was about the fact that we have no interest in watering down UK standards. You know, when that comes to things like consumer protection, workers' rights, food standards and so on. You know, that's what he was talking about. And he was talking about that very clearly in the context of our red lines when it comes to our relationship with the EU. You know, and those red lines are around, you know, not rejoining the single market or the customs union and not bringing back freedom of movement. You know, we have those red lines, but within those red lines, we're clear that we do need an improved trading relationship with the EU, and that's what we would seek to secure.
Unfortunately, it is being interpreted differently by a great many commentators this morning as saying this is what he's up to. He's playing at almost rejoining the EU, certainly cozying up to the EU. Isn't that a very dangerous game for him to be playing at this stage pre-election?
Well, look, I think this is about doing what is in our national interest, what's in our national economic interest, you know, as well as our other national interests when it comes to security, supply chains, cross-border policing, and so on. And actually, I think when I hear some of the Conservatives speaking about what Keir Starmer said, it does feel to me like a kind of an attempt to distract from the fact that they have no plan to make Brexit work. You know, we know that businesses are suffering from greater red tape. We know this is impacting on growth. We know it's deepening the cost of living crisis. You know, that's why we want to see an improved trading relationship with the EU to help grow the economy and make people across Britain better off.
Yeah, but what I don't understand is why was he implying through his comments that if we don't sort of stop divergence from the EU when it comes to things like workers' rights, when it comes to things like environmental pledges, why is he implying that Britain will be weaker, that we can't legislate in as good a way or even a stronger way than the EU?
Well, look, I think the comments were very clearly about the fact that we're not in the business of wanting to water down these rights. You know, we're not in the business of wanting to weaken consumer protection or food standards and so on. And actually, you know, having higher protections, having higher standards can help to reduce trade barriers, you know, with the EU. So if we had a veterinary agreement, for instance, with the EU, if you have two jurisdictions where they both have higher animal welfare standards, that reduces barriers, it minimises checks and so on. So, you know, this is about improving our trading relationship, but within those very clear red lines that I set out around the single market, customs union, freedom of movement and so on.
Do you think he meant for these comments to go as public as they have now gone? He was speaking at a conference of what commentators are calling middle range left, centre left political people in Canada. Do you think he really meant for this to be brought back to Britain, where people will interpret it as, well, anti-Brexit?
Well, look, I think the comments were entirely in line with the position that we said numerous times, which is that we have red lines when it comes to our relationship with the EU, that we want to see an improved trading relationship, and that we have no interest in watering down consumer protection and other important UK standards. You know, I think all we're seeing is as I said, the Conservatives attempting to distract from the fact that they have no plan to make Brexit work.
Yeah, but it's all about perception, isn't it? I mean, you know this better than we do, being in the politics game. When he said we don't want to diverge from the EU, well, I mean, anyone with any half a dollar per cent is going to know how people, I mean, not how the Tories are going to spin this, but how members of the public are going to respond to that, and particularly, you've got to say, in those former Red Wall seats.
Well, I think what members of the public, I hope, are hearing from us, because we've been saying it so many times, is the fact that we have red lines when it comes to our relationship with the EU around, as I said, single market, customs union, freedom of movement. You know, people can be very clear where we stand on that, but we're also not afraid to say, look, we do need an improved trading relationship with the EU. That's in our national interest. That will help our economy to grow, help our businesses to prosper. You know, so we're being very clear about what our red lines are, but also what we need to get the economy back on track.
OK.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Well, does that make sense to you? Maybe it does. You know, being very clear there, they have the red lines, no freedom of movement, no single market. You know, they're important red lines, says the Labour Party will not cross them.
But that's not necessarily how you're seeing it.
No.
Rosanna from Cumbria says, my son is 17 and neither he nor his friends would want any closer ties with the EU at all. Not up north, anyway.
Paul says the only group where there was a majority to Remain were politicians. They've done everything they can to damage our economy and blame Brexit.
Yeah, people are seeing all Keir Starmer's remarks as either pro or anti-Brexit. That's their argument. Jonathan is saying, I am not a big fan, but my mates at the university are really edging towards the EU. Some of them are choosing to do their masters there instead of here.
Well, keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews at gbnews.com. Let's see what the weather's going to do. Here's Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland, but the cloud will build through the day. The showers will transfer east so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall, but the showers are transferring east. Odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier day expected compared with yesterday, and it's going to be, well, slightly below average as far as temperatures are concerned, but nothing untoward. Then into the evening, showers tending to become restricted to coasts for a time before eventually easing away completely. Widely clear skies, lighter winds, and as a result, all the ingredients there for a cool start to Saturday. Widely mid to high single figures, but in some sheltered parts, mid Wales northwards, a touch of frost is possible. Still a brisk wind as we start off Saturday in the far north of Scotland, Caithness, Sutherland, Shetland and Orkney seeing the odd shower. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a beautiful start to the weekend, plenty of blue skies. Cloud will build into the afternoon, but it stays dry for the vast majority. It will feel cool, but given the dry and fine weather, a perfectly pleasant day is expected.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come for you this morning, we're back with our People's Panel in Tamworth. This is GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
"9:20, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, but it's all going to come to a crashing end at 9:30.
Well, it is. Because then it'll be Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Ellie, and they're here to tell us what's going on in the programme.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning.
Nice to see you.
Hello. Yeah, we've got a packed show coming up.
Well, you do know that you think you're going to talk politics and serious issues, but spam has taken over the airwaves.
It will descend, yes.
Well,
Save our spam.
This is precisely what we're going to do, a bit of silliness, but also a bit of seriousness.
What?
I think we'll sort of try and merge it together.
Spam is not silly.
It's a luxury item now.
It's a luxury item and it's very serious.
Just every time you mention spam, I can only think back to Monty Python and sort of going spam, spam, spam. I'm not going to do the whole song.
According to Wikipedia, because I've been researching, that is why we call spam in the computer.
Yes, yes, I did know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Because Monty Python is huge with internet geeks.
Yeah.
And so all of the early internet words come from, So, no, we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer as well.
Good.
Not just spam, but also what our policy towards the European Union should be.
Yes, because that's really interesting comments. Also, the King and Queen in France.
Aren't
They've
they
gone
doing
down
well?
very, very well, haven't they? And the Queen has looked particularly beautiful, I think.
I still can't get over calling her the Queen.
Oh, really?
My brain doesn't quite click into it.
Oh, no, I've got into that now. But there you go. Anyway, look, we've got to leave you there, but we'll see you at 9:30. I'll tell you why we're ditching you so quickly, because we've got to head back to Tamworth and our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, with the People's Panel.
Yeah, good morning to you. We're back here at the People's Panel in Tamworth. We've been discussing so many issues here this morning, and there's one more I just wanted to touch on with you, Brogan, and it's childcare, because you're a young parent. What is the issues that you're seeing with childcare, and how might a future MP here, when that by-election happens in a few weeks' time, what could they do to help you?
It's family, it's just too expensive. It's families, it's the whole reason I work for myself and I've been self-employed for 9 years, because I just could not afford the childcare. Reliant on grandparents, which my parents still work, they're still having to pick up where I can't, and it's just, I know so many families and so many mums that work for themselves because they have to work because of the cost of living and everything else, and both parents have to work, but they just can't afford the childcare. So it's having a knock-on effect through families and through generations, where grandparents are having to pick up the slack because we can't, we have to work.
Yeah, I mean, that point specifically, and everything we've talked about this morning, whether it's your trust in a politician, whether it's feeling like you're not necessarily represented, I think from the feeling that I've got this morning is that this is not just an issue for Tamworth, but this is the same kind of issues and problems that there are around the country, you know, footfall on town centres, but also, I guess, the feeling that, you know, you've got yourselves as this group and what you do, but certainly that I've got this morning is that there's so much positivity around Tamworth, so much positivity and so much future that you think maybe whoever your next MP is could really get stuck into. But just finally on that, very quickly, each of you, how worried, or should the Prime Minister be worried about this by-election here?
Absolutely. If the last majority was 20,000, if that manages to be overturned, I think that's going to be indicative of how the rest of the country are going to vote. So, yeah, 100%.
Shane?
100%. To lose a majority of over 20,000, that's going to set the precedent across the country, in my view.
All right, Brogan?
Yep, I think the same as well.
And Martin?
Yeah, I agree with everybody here that that's a big majority to lose, and it could be indicative of the rest of the country.
All right, thank you so much for joining us here on the People's Panel this morning. That by-election is on the 19th of October.
Lovely stuff. And Jack, thank you very much indeed. That is it from us. We're back 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Up next, Tom and Ellie.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a fresh start out there, but a bright start for many of us. Further showers, however, are around and they'll develop widely through the day. Initially, the showers focused for northern, central and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The best of the sunshine will be across the Midlands, Eastern England, Eastern Scotland. But the cloud will build through the day. The showers will transfer east so that by the afternoon it is drying up somewhat across Northern Ireland, West Wales, Devon and Cornwall. But the showers are transferring east. Odd rumble of thunder possible in Eastern England by the end of the day. A cool feel with a windier